Formed infants all prove less effective than a single photograph of Trish smiling. Smokers can expect to see the graphic campaign as early as next month, paired with a simple line of text that reads, "Cigarettes cause Trish." In Science News, a new study finds that every style of parenting inevitably produces disturbed and miserable adults.
Despite a great variance in parenting styles across populations, from overprotective to permissive, the end product is always the same, a profoundly flawed and joyless human being.
One bright note of the study, adults can find temporary happiness when they're able to perpetuate the cycle of human misery by having children. In other news, the Pulitzer Board adds a giant pumpkin category, and a local man's utter failure in life is a bit of a sore spot. For more news, visit theonion.com/newsbeat.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program here. Join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. And you can bring up whatever you want to discuss. Here in the studio tonight, it is Ian.
And Chris.
And you can join us online anytime you want. Head over to freetalklive.com. Enjoy the features on the site there, including our social media platform, which is Mastodon. That is a slightly more decentralized system because there's thousands of Mastodon servers out there as compared to, say, Twitter, which is all controlled by Twitter. Different people control the Mastodon server, so we have our own, and you can join it over at social.freetalklive.com. In fact, I'm trying to get in to access Aria's account right now so we can post her updates that she's been sending to our Mastodon server, but unfortunately we've got to get a hold of her phone first, and there's going to be some hoops to jump through, but hopefully we'll get that going. I do have access to her Twitter account, so she has actually been posting some of she's thanked some of her donors. People have already been giving very generously already to her commissary account in federal prison, which is where she is right now. She's in a camp.
Does she know if there's a limit for her commissary account? Because I know at the jail you guys were at, they had a limit on, I think, like $300 a week or something like that.
I have not heard if there is any such of a limit in that particular case. But
so I'm just wondering what happens if people keep pushing funds into the account and then will it come up with a block? How is it done? Is there a website that you go to do the donation? Do you know?
Unfortunately, there is you have to use Western Union.
Oh, wow.
MoneyGram, and or you can send like a money order. I think there's some sort of instructions as to how to do that. And of course, Western Union and MoneyGram are a huge pain in the butt to use if you don't. If they don't like you for some reason, like
you're one of the crypto six,
right?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I think Western Union has me blacklisted from having accepted too much money over the years in various payments or whatever the reason is. So they put me through a ridiculous know your customer Q&A in order, before I could actually use the site, and it's going to take 10 days to get an approval. But I was able to use MoneyGram, although they rejected the first debit card that I tried to use because they don't want corporate cards, which was just a PayPal card. And then I tried to use a different card, but they won't do that card won't allow for money transfers or whatever.
Oh, right.
So it's considered a cash advance.
Correct. So I had to go through 4 different cards, and then I finally got Bonnie's bank card was the one that finally worked. So it did take some time, but I was able to send some money in. Now, it is like an $8.95 fee. So if you're going to send $20, they're going to charge you an $8.95 fee on top of that. So it's always better to send more at one fell swoop than it is to send less.
It might not be a bad idea for somebody who remembers mail to jail, for example, to say, hey, instead of sending money directly to Aria's account, send it to me. I'll make a public accounting of what I've received, and then send it in $500 chunks.
Right.
So the $8 doesn't matter then.
That way it'll be a much smaller portion. Yeah, it's a great point.
Assuming you're allowed to do that, because they may have restrictions on the amounts.
They may have. You'd have to look that up in advance. Like if it was $250, I mean, it's still better than sending $20 and losing half
for sure,
of it.
for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it would be on top, I think. So it wouldn't come out of the 20. It would be $28.95 in that particular case. But it's still pretty brutal.
You know, this is an interesting question. So Aria was unwilling to accept, from what she said to me anyway, donations before, but she's willing to do the people to accept donations for her commissary.
When you say she was unwilling to accept donations, do you mean like for legal funds
Yeah.
or something? Yeah, or it's because her attorney was taking care of it.
Okay. So she's okay with it now, just not before.
Yeah.
Now, if you ever find yourself with a donation you're having a hard time getting rid of, I know some people.
Yeah,
solve that problem for you.
Yeah, exactly.
No. It was just because she seemed very resistant to take people's money previously, and criticizing it. So I just wasn't. I just wasn't sure I fully understood if we were doing this without her knowledge, or if it was.
No,
with
she's
her.
very grateful to have received what she has received already. It's going to make it, when you're in jail, you got to have money in the commissary, or you're just subsisting on whatever toothbrush that they happen to give you, and that's about it. You might get a pencil and paper, but besides that, you're not going to have a whole lot of comforts, if there are any comforts to be had.
Right.
Yeah. And it's important for the community as well, because when you think about it, it's the same concept as insurance, where they could smash any one of us at any time because they don't need you to be guilty of anything, and especially those of us who are most dedicated to being activists. Well, as the Japanese say, it's the nail that sticks his head up that gets smashed down. So it's definitely a good plan for those who have been fortunate to help a brother out when they're in that situation, because you never know when the positions could be reversed.
Absolutely, and if they do want you, they can totally get you, right? Like they can. Find something. Was it 3 felonies a day, I think, is the average person commits?
Yeah, if you use a can of deodorant and you don't precisely follow the instructions on the can, guess what? You're a felon. You're a subhuman who's not permitted to carry weapons.
It's kind of funny, right? It's laughable, but it's at the same time, you're right. If you read the cans and you read federal law,
it says
it does. There are penalties for misuse of all sorts of products that are just really putting on deodorant. Like if I put a little too much deodorant on, it's a crime, it's a felony. I mean, come on.
But if you misuse the government to murder 1 million Iraqis for absolutely no reason, they'll forgive you for that, because that's no big deal. But spray some off in the wrong direction, and you're a bad man.
And people, the funny thing is, people laugh in a sense because they think, oh well, who's ever going to get prosecuted for it? And they're
the guy they don't like.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. That's the thing that I think people don't understand. They've criminalized everything, and it's not that you're not committing crimes. It's just they don't care about you, right? They're using all of these laws and the number of laws in order to go after those that they dislike, the people who stand up and say, hey, that's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Ayn Rand was right. It was wrong about some things, but one thing she got completely right. It was a government official talking to a recalcitrant industrialist, and he said, we don't pass these laws to be followed. We pass, actually it starts out, there's no way to rule free men. The only power any government has is to crack down on criminals. So if your society doesn't doesn't produce enough criminals,
You gotta make some.
make more. You create so many crimes that nobody can turn around without breaking a law, and then you cash in on the fear. And also, the side effect, which is very nice, is if you have an enemy that you want to crush, you can do that and force the people he loves at gunpoint to pay for it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I've gotten a number of emails from Aria over the last few days, and so far it's she hasn't been assigned to anything. It sounds like she may have some sort of say in what job she's able to take at this particular facility, which would be really nice. It's nice to be able to choose that sort of thing.
Where is it?
She's in Devens, Massachusetts, which is apparently maybe an hour and a half or an hour away from here. So not bad, not a bad location as far as being able to be accessed for visitation and things like that. And apparently there used to be a limit on the number of visitors that you can have. I just learned from her today that does not apply, at least in her classification, which is at a camp. She's at one of the camps, so there's no barbed wire or anything like that. There's not even a fence at the facility. They don't have lockdown. They have a recall. So if you're out in the the yard or whatever you call that area, being outside of the facility, they do have loudspeakers they can get on and say, all right, recall. Everybody's got to come back in. But it's not the same thing as being locked down. They don't have cells or anything like that. So it definitely seems like it is. It could be a lot worse as far as the situation that she's in. And
I hope they're not planting any memories of a trip to Mars.
Has she described it as like bunk beds, kind of in like a large room? Because that tends to be what
it's kind of like that, yeah. But apparently there are some like cubicle things to block off, so you could still, in theory, change your clothes without everybody in the room seeing you.
Yeah, like I'm thinking like dividers probably. There's probably like 4 people to like a section or something like that. 2 bunk beds, something like that.
One thing she did say is that apparently she's been informed that if she were to call Free Talk Live, she would violate the rule against quote-unquote third-party contacts, and so they are disallowing her from calling into Free Talk Live. I did tell her that she could ask if she wants to. I think she is going to. Could she call and do a recorded interview with, off the air, right? So not when we're live. Just do a recorded interview, and then we play that back later on. It's a silly idea that this is a third-party call, because normally third-party calls would be you call your mom and then you have her do another call and conference the call.
So wait, why?
So they don't know the difference between a radio and a telephone, is what you're telling me.
I am very confused because how does calling a radio station constitute a third-party call? Because you're not
an arbitrary decision by
relaying.
them. That's all.
It's not like it's a relaying from one person to another. It's you're literally talking to
Well, remember, these are people so stupid that they can only survive by getting a job where the customers have no choice about buying the product.
Yeah, and it's kind of also weird in that like she doesn't really have control over that in this particular situation, right? Like if she were to call,
anybody could record the call without her knowing and throw it over the radio if they wanted.
Right. I obviously we're not going to do that, but it just seems like, but again, I totally understand that these inmates are basically having to apply or abide by arbitrary
rules. You got to do what they say, or you don't get your good time.
Right.
Hopefully, some of them will end up in prison after the revolution comes.
So maybe we'll get to hear her voice on the air if we can do one of the recorded interviews. But according to somebody else who's been in the Bureau of Prisons system, the Bureau of Prisons, the BOP, does not like publicity. They don't really want you to be on the radio. That's the reason why they don't want her calling in. It's not because it's a third party. It's not because we're going to conference her with another caller or whatever.
Right. It's because they're terrified of somebody growing a pair of balls and starting to give them what they deserve.
Right. And, of course, when you're in their custody, if you step out of line, then you end up in the special housing unit, which is essentially, you're being cut off from everybody else. It's punishment. It's the hole, as some refer to it. It's probably better at a camp than it is elsewhere. But if you keep effing up, they'll escalate you to a minimum or a medium security prison. You don't. They're not obligated to keep you in the camp.
Right.
And that can be a matter of life and death.
I feel like there's
especially
for her.
somebody in
there's a
Arya's
name.
position.
Yeah, right. You're right. But I think there's a name for that, isn't it? Like something like Communications Management Unit or something.
That's
like
different.
That? Oh, okay.
That's what Cantwell was on.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And Ross Ulbricht for a time. Now, I believe he's not in there at this time, but earlier on, they were holding him in the CMU. That is a different situation. The whole is where you're completely cut off from all other humans. The Communications Management Unit, you just simply cannot talk to anyone besides maybe your mom. Like, you're very restricted in who you can talk to your lawyer, you can talk to your mom, and that's about it. And if you're going to call your mom, you have to, like, let them know in advance that you're going to call, and it's 15 minutes maximum or whatever.
Yikes.
Like, it's highly restricted. You cannot write letters. You can't receive mail, like that kind of stuff. It's highly restricted.
This is exactly how we open, or how I guess the government opens itself up to being able to abuse people with immunity, right? Like, because there's no way for people to find out about the abuses that occur. And
yeah,
I mean,
if you're in a CMU, you can't talk about it.
They're already routine, but now you can't find out about them as somebody in the general public.
Right.
Well, unless they Epstein you while you're in there, they'll eventually hear about it.
Well, presuming you still have an attorney.
I thought you meant like people on the street would hear about what's going on inside. Okay, I might have misunderstood that.
Well, if you're in a CMU, you're pretty much cut off from talking to people on the street. So you'd have to get the word
but
out through an
eventually,
attorney.
if they don't Epstein you, you'll get out.
Yes, that is true.
And then people
unless you're
will find
Ross
out
Ulbricht, and then you'll
what
never
happened.
get out.
The problem is that the people who love you will be upset if it happens to you while you're in prison, but they don't understand that you have to extrapolate that to other people,
right?
So you can solve the problem before it happens to you.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no solving this problem unless we, end the United States federal government. Or unless they come to an end, perhaps a financial failure that may be on the horizon.
I'd step back a little
somewhere.
bit from saying end it, because you're not going to end it. You may be able to end it in New Hampshire, but you won't be able to end it. There's zero chance.
Right, because, you can't just elect your way out of this problem.
I don't want to end it completely. Because when people tell me, oh, it was better when we had to pay half of our income to murder people globally, then you say, oh, you think so? Well, great. They're right down south. Don't let the door hit you in the ass. But I was talking about a donkey, of course.
Yeah. Phones are open if you want to join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. So she says so far everybody's been very, very nice to her. They've gifted her things, which she was wary of accepting gifts from people. But she's saying that the few things she's been given haven't had strings attached. It's just been from other people that remember what it was like to be there their first day. So she got like a water bottle from somebody. She got a Pepsi from somebody else, and some coffee. That's
I'd be really reluctant to accept gifts too.
Yeah, if you accept some cocaine, you might well have somebody expecting something in return. But it takes a while before you'll put out for a bottle of water.
Right?
So, again, it could be a lot worse for her. And as far as writing to her is concerned, or sending books, she said apparently she's already received 9 books in just the first, 3 or 4 days that she's been there. Nice. So very, very, in fact, she almost feels like she should take her book thing offline, but I don't think you're restricted on the number of books you can receive. It's just you can't have them in your cell all at once. So they usually, at least in state jail, they have your quote-unquote property. So they got like a tote that's in storage, and then they just put your stuff in there. So if you have 20 books, they only let you have 3 at a time in the state jails here in New Hampshire. So the other 17 are in your property, and then the 3 are in your cell, and you can just swap them out as you need to. But she's a little overwhelmed and very grateful at how much support has poured out financially and through books that have been sent. So her first jail blog, as you and I have both done, Nobody, blogging from jail. Aria is now doing that, except hers is technically a prison blog rather than a jail blog. And that is up on her site, which is ariadimezzo.com. I also cross-posted it over to freekeene.com today. She was reading the Gulag Archipelago that someone sent to her.
Book.
Yeah, good and terrifying at the same time. I mean, really, really interesting reading, but also just a horrific subject matter that it's very entertaining at the same time as being just absolutely awful. The contents that you would read in that book. For listeners that aren't familiar, it's Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was in an actual Russian gulag. He survived the experience, one of the few to survive it, and he gets into what it's actually like there from various different people who survived over the years, various different stories that had come out of what it was like both inside and outside, what it was like to live in Russia and what it was like to live in the gulag at the time. We're talking about 100+ years ago at this point. It was wild to read that book, and I only got through the first of the three. That's divided into 3 different parts. When I was in there, I only had time to get through the first one, but it's one of the wildest books I've ever read.
I think one of my favorite quotes actually came from that.
Really?
From that book. Yeah, it starts out how we burned later in the camps. And I would go on about that, but I'm actually probably going to look it up during the break so I can give it to you verbatim.
If you want to join the show, here the number is 603-283-6160. So there's your update on what's going on with Aria. There's some news regarding the federal government's Supreme Court. Of course, we discussed yesterday how the kind of fake ruling against affirmative action had come out. It was getting a lot of headlines that affirmative action has been overturned at the university or the college level, but then we found that they can still get around it, essentially, if they want to. They can still kind of have the policy without having the policy effectively, and they've already figured out how to circumvent this particular ruling.
They can, but with the program in place, they can do it pretty much with absolute impunity. Whereas
that's true.
If that's not there, then they would be susceptible to things like discrimination suits. If you can intercept some email that says, oh yeah, we're not going to let this kid in, he's white, we're going to let somebody in with 25% less on their SATs, then that would open them up to a lawsuit.
It would.
Of course, I think they should get rid of that too, because only a fool would let his enemy educate his children, or let his enemy educate him.
Yeah, indeed. You shouldn't. The whole idea of going to college is a ridiculous, I think, concept for the most part for most people, unless you absolutely need to for whatever career.
This generation it is. It used to be great, but then they started the student loan program, and the price of college multiplied by 5 times, and also the number of graduates created a huge supply of English teachers and women's studies makers, whatever they make. Well, there are no plumbers and no electricians.
You know what it is? It's a market problem, right? Because it's partially because it's the government, right? Grants and things of that nature, but they're not some things like medical students and things like that we don't have enough of, and in other cases we have too many, right? So
well, don't worry, the AMA has been telling us that we were going to have a glut of doctors, and they talked to the federal government and the paying hospitals not to teach them.
Speaking of college loans, that's the next decision that's just come out of the Supreme Court. We'll tell you about it coming up.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan plan, a major setback in his bid to forgive billions of dollars in debt for tens of millions of borrowers. In a 6-3 ruling on Friday, justices rejected his program just minutes after another landmark judgment relating to free speech and LGBTQ rights. FSN's Benji Heyer reports from Washington.
It's a huge loss for the Biden administration. The judgment from the court that the government does not have the ability to wipe out more than a quarter of the country's $1.7 trillion in outstanding federal student debt. The challenge had been brought by 6 states, alleging the campaign pledge amounted to executive overreach, an improper exercise of power. On a busy morning for the justices, also by 6-3, they voted that an anti-discrimination Colorado law cannot require an evangelical Christian web designer to provide same-sex wedding websites. Businesses, says dissenting Judge Sonia Sotomayor, now have a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. A giant step backwards, claims Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, for human rights and equal protection in the United States. Benji Heyer, Washington, D.C.
The U.S. has sent B-52 bombers to the Korean Peninsula in the latest show of strength against North Korea. South Korea says joint military drills with the U.S. are in response to Pyongyang's continued missile tests. FSN's U.S. correspondent William Denzelo reports.
According to Seoul's defense ministry, the US nuclear-capable bombers participated in aerial drills with South Korean jets. This comes after the US deployed a nuclear-powered submarine to the Korean peninsula earlier this month, as Washington continues to increase the visibility of its strategic assets. The US and its allies have repeatedly called on North Korea to abandon its nuclear and missile programs. Pyongyang accuses Washington of planning an invasion and has conducted over 100 tests since the start of last year. Last weekend, mass rallies were held in the capital to mark the 73rd anniversary of the Korean War. William Denzelo, New York.
An air quality alert has been issued for all 5 boroughs in New York City as the smog from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket the Big Apple. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Friday's air quality readings topped 150, and with readings at that level, officials recommend that people with heart or lung diseases and children reduce their exposure to the smog, meaning stay indoors. It is expected that the smog moves out of the city by late Friday. Jody Jacobs, New York.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is...
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. It is Ian, Nobody, and Chris here in the studio tonight. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash. It's digital cash. Dash is a cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees on the Bitcoin network for the last, 6 years now have basically made Bitcoin useless for purchases.
But I paid $6 yesterday to do a $1,500 transfer.
Whoa.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely absurd.
I know
on Bitcoin. Just to clarify, on Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin. I mean, BTC is a fraction of a penny, but Bitcoin is the only, or BCH is a fraction of a penny, but the only thing that Cash App will take is BTC. And the only safe way, apparently, for me to trade is to do it with big corporations.
Oh, you can use Bitcoin again. You can use crypto.
You can, yeah.
Oh, nice.
for
Congratulations.
quite a while.
I didn't realize that for some reason. I guess I was thinking
after the sentencing, apparently
probation.
all is well with using
Nice.
Bitcoin BTC for the Crypto 6.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Aria will
And
be able
also
to use
the
it
good coins.
Yeah. Like Dash, which is you talk about less than a cent fee. That's true with Dash. That they're actually way less than 1 cent per transaction, as I understand it. And Dash has implemented some really cool features to make it undefeated as the most useful currency in the marketplace. They've got much faster confirmation times. In fact, Dash even has an instant send feature as well. You don't have to worry about confirmations before considering a Dash transaction complete because their network is actually protected from the dreaded 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. And as far as I know, no other chains have that. And so pretty much any chain that is underneath Bitcoin as far as its popularity is subjected to the 51% attack, with the exception of Dash.
Only if they use proof of work, because Stellar, for example, is one of several coins that isn't susceptible to that, and also doesn't have to use enough energy to power a small country.
So you can use Dash very easily as a merchant, for instance. It's one of the oldest cryptos out there. It's widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get. It's easy to use Dash. You can start by learning more at Dash.org, and big thanks to the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. You can visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. That is Dash.org. Let's go to your phone calls and thoughts here. We've got Major Payne on the line in Michigan. Go ahead, Major.
Hey, even though you had to pay that $6 for Bitcoin, that was still cheaper than if you'd have gone to Walmart and sent a store-to-store transaction.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
As $8
cheaper than getting a hooker too.
And as much as we criticize Bitcoin here on the show, it's not anywhere near as bad as the traditional systems. I can easily see $70 charges for merchants, like when you use a credit card to say purchase a laptop or something from my company. So yeah, and those fees, people are deceived because they get passed on to the consumer, but they don't see it as a separate charge. So
because it's actually the retailer who eats it.
It's not really the retailer who eats it.
The customer who pays for it.
The retailer passes it on to the customer.
Well, yeah, and those fees are 3%. So, like, in order to pay that $6 that I paid on Bitcoin, all you have to do is spend $200 on your credit card instead of sending $2,000.
Yep, that's true. But that said, I mean, if you had paid $200 instead of $1,500, it still probably would have been $6. I mean, the fees from Bitcoin are calculated not based on the amount of the transaction, but the actual number of bytes in the transaction, and that can depend on, without getting too technical, that depends on some other things like how split up your Bitcoins are. If they're split into a bunch of different wallets, you don't necessarily see that, and that may result in a higher fee than if they're not split up. But the thing you want to look at,
it's going to get worse and worse every time, because every time you send somebody a payment, it like takes a set of unspent outputs that's actually generally larger than the amount. It sends that, and then it cuts one of the pieces in two and sends the change back to you. So
into a different unspent output.
Exactly. So it'll just get more and more fragmented as time goes on, which will cause the transactions to get bigger and bigger.
All I'm thinking of is how we need a defrag program for the blockchain.
Well, I mean, there certainly is such a thing. You could even have a defragging if it was built into the coin. You couldn't do it with Bitcoin, but if you were doing Ethereum and you were designing it with the benefit of some hindsight, you could definitely just have a special case smart contract built into the chain that just whatever you send it, it will destroy and then generate new coins and send them back.
I think we're getting a little too off into the weeds to talk about defragging on broadcast radio. But right now, I think the most useful thing to look at here is the median transaction fee on Bitcoin. There's a handy chart of that over at bitinfocharts.com, because the median fee is going to be, pretty common, right? Like median, half of the fees are higher, half the fees are lower. So a lot of people are experiencing this median fee, which is right now, today, $1.13 to send one Bitcoin transaction. So,
so if you pay $1.50 for a cup of coffee, that's 66% that you have to pay over and above the cost.
I will say,
I wonder if that's why BCH went up 30% yesterday and over 100% this week. I wonder if people are starting to catch on.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Bitcoin Cash has been shooting up recently. So anyway, Major, what else did you have to say?
I like the real Bitcoin.
Camouflage everything. If you use a strange ATM and you don't have enough money in your account, like 10 grand, I think it is, where they give you free ATMs, they'll bang you $3 to pull out $20.
Oh yeah.
But anyway,
that's true.
I want to touch on the Supreme Court cases, but first, you guys were talking about the
which, of course, by the way, hurts poor people more than it does the wealthy, because a poor person is more likely to be pulling out smaller amounts. And so they're the ones that are getting hit for the largest percentage of fees.
Oh, yeah.
And less likely to get banks doing nice things for them, like waiving all the fees.
And it actually gets even way worse when it comes to the poorer populations, because they often don't have bank accounts because, bank accounts are expensive because of all the fees, but it ends up becoming even more expensive without the bank accounts, because you end up paying higher rates for things like prepaid cards in order to do, basic stuff like online, purchases and things like that. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen the prepaid cards, but they're really, they've got fee, like Visa prepaid cards.
Yeah, sure.
They got really
fees
high
all over the place. You got to pay a fee to load it. You got to pay a fee to
often these same people have they get paid in these prepaid cards as well by their employers. So,
Major,
you guys remember earlier in the show you were talking about being a felon with a can of underarm deodorant?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, I figure I was probably a felon at the age of 10. I used to make what they call tennis ball cannons. This is back when beer cans were stamped on both ends, right? The end caps. And you could take a P38, which is an old Army can opener, and cut both ends off. And then the last can, you just rip the tab off, and you punch a little hole in it. And that's where you shoot the lighter fluid in, and you shake it around good. And, hey, you have, if you're going to use it as a mortar, you can do it yourself, but we got kind of high tech. We put butt pads on them, and if you had your buddy light it for you, you could actually hit something. So
was the idea you put multiple cans together?
Yeah, we take duct tape and put them together.
I see. Okay, duct tape. That was what I was missing.
Like stand long or whatever.
Is it kind of like a potato gun, except that those are PVC? Right?
Yeah, well, this was the predecessor to the potato gun. I was making these before the potato gun came to be. That's a whole other story. That's probably how I became a felon, because we were using Aquanet and that.
So is this was this some sort of I want to use the word explosive, but I don't necessarily know if it's an actual explosion, but like some sort of thing that goes boom?
Something that goes boom.
Aquanet is flammable.
Okay. Yeah. But it goes boom. It doesn't just catch fire.
Well, it's going to go boom if it's in an enclosed space,
which is what we're talking about.
Yes.
So it probably ends up being a felon.
Yeah, a potato gun will bust through a 1-inch plank, but tennis ball cannons were a lot safer.
I got you.
Like I said, we talked my old man into being a carnival duck one time after we'd figured out how to shoulder fire these things. So 3 of us in the side yard and him about 30 yards off. He's walking back and forth laughing at us, thinking we can't hit him. Well, after about the second go-round with each one of us, we whacked him. Each one of us whacked him once. He'd been hit 3 times. He headed for the house. He'd had enough of that.
Are you actually old enough to where this might not have even been a crime because they hadn't passed the explosion, the federal laws on explosives?
Anytime you hit anybody with anything, it's assault.
Well, no, but just building the device that goes boom at one point wasn't, it wasn't a crime, a felony. It wasn't a felony at the federal level.
I don't know. I started building tennis ball cannons in about 70, and I graduated to potato guns about 72.
Okay, so you probably were past the cutoff for that. So you probably were committing a felony at the time. I think I'm not 100% positive, but I think it was like in the 1930s that they passed they started to regulate that, and it became a felony at the federal
You're
level.
only a felon if you get caught.
Yeah, and the thing is, it was probably illegal when I was a kid, but it wasn't like now where they're actually going to send Army, Air Force, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines after you for, setting off a ladyfinger. And now they're just insane. Total overcompensation.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if any kid in the 70s wasn't a felon or would be a felon had they decided to prosecute, like if they were actually prosecuting, people like they are today.
Yeah. Although I did have a friend who put a pipe bomb in a mailbox, and he ended up with a federal felony for that.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you can't mess with the U.S. mail.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think they've been particularly. I think they have even in the past been particular about the mailboxes, but I don't.
That's
think,
federal property.
Yeah,
right?
I don't.
Even though you buy it,
yeah,
it's federal property apparently.
Yeah, I my gut is it was more like it wasn't really something they went after if it was like in a field back in the day, but now even in a field you'd probably get in trouble for it.
Well, that's why back then we were outstanding in the field.
All right, Major.
Talk there.
Thanks for the call tonight, man. I appreciate it. Let's talk to Ricky in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Ricky.
Thank you there, Brother Ian, Brother Chris, Brother Nobody. Welcome back. Good evening.
What's up?
What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I was kind of thinking, this came up a while back, just a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned, and we didn't really talk about it, and I figured maybe we could discuss it, the fact that I've never pledged allegiance to the flag in my life, still haven't in any capacity. I won't wear anything.
It's pretty impressive.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I look back
Did
at
you have
it,
parents who didn't participate in that as well, and so they set an example for you?
The only way I can think of it is if you had like a Jehovah Witness, or if your parents were Jehovah Witness.
Looking back at my life, I've been a Confederate Democrat from my earliest memories, and I'll tell you, I hate that flag. I hate the flag. I hate the pledge with it. I got a million reasons. I mean, there's nothing good, huh?
I really have to ask you one question. How did you get away with not standing for the pledge in like elementary school? Did you not go to a government school where they just didn't say the pledge?
No, I sure did. Did it raise hell? Sure. My parents stood by me, and it was a big deal. They finally gave up, but it took a while. But here are my reasons why I hate the damn thing.
They used to take the Constitution a lot more seriously.
Well, yeah,
a little
I think
more
that
serious.
was the thing, too. I think you're right, Nobody. I had that working for me for the time period. I mean, we're talking starting in the late 70s, going into early 80s, But see, here's the reasons why I hate the damn thing. I mean, there's nothing good attached to it. But let's look at the pledge. Let's look at that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Well, I got a problem right there. I hate that flag and everything attached to it. Then it goes, and to the republic for which it stands. Well, this hasn't been a true republic in my lifetime that I know of. Okay, now we continue. One nation under God. Well, I have a problem with that, too, because, that goes without saying. Okay, indivisible. Wait a minute. That's where the Confederacy part of me kicked in, because I had it in my head already. Weren't we divided at one point? And what's this? The Union can't be divided?
That's what they're trying to inculcate people with that concept, for sure. The idea that this is a perpetual union that you've joined, but you can never leave. It's ridiculous.
You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave.
It's amazing the amount of brainwashing that goes on in elementary schools across this country.
Here's the best part, the ending. With liberty and justice for all. That's not quite in touch with reality in my lifetime. And I don't
Yeah,
think it
tell
ever
some
happened.
16-year-old kid who got drafted and died in Vietnam that everybody gets liberty and justice in America.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, one thing I'll tell you, for a year, every time I went out in 2017, I wrapped myself with the Southern Cross, the battle flag, and I'll tell you why that was okay. Because, see, here's the reality when it came to the Civil War. Here's what it was really all about. It wasn't about race. It wasn't even about leaving the Union. What happened is after South Carolina blew it away in 1861, the CSA formed quickly. Now, they went further than saying we're just leaving the Union. This is what made Lincoln crap his pants. They said this land, the property here, that don't belong to you guys at all anymore. That belongs to us. This ain't a territory at all. Because I'm looking at it, if someone were to secede today, including Pennsylvania and New Hampshire, if you didn't say we're still a territory and you said this land belongs to us, what do you think's going to happen? 600,000 people were dead. The infrastructure of the South destroyed. The economy obliterated. Why? To steal that land back by force. That battle flag, they were fighting for the land, which belonged to them. That's what the war was about, and it's sad because there's 600,000 people dead.
Well, a lot of idiots still thought that, having a federal government was a good idea in those days. I mean, you got to be pretty stupid if you still believe that in 2023.
It's amazing how many people hold on to the idea of the federal government, even though it is so awful, so overbearing, so huge, so taxing, and so ridiculous and violent. They still believe that we just need to elect the right people.
I have a lot of fun with long division, and one of the things that I found fascinating is I ran across the number that they believe that Bush murdered 1 million people in Iraq. So I looked at the average murder rate, which is slightly under 20,000. I can't remember exactly what the number was, but basically I divided one by the other and found out now there's 1.5 million people between active duty military and active duty police. That's 0.5% of the population.
Okay.
Well, or 1 out of every 200 people. Okay. Well, that 0.5% of our population murdered more people in Iraq alone than the other 99.5% of the population will murder in the next 67 years. And if you make COVID, if you call COVID 10 million, then it would take every murderer in the United States working at full capacity to match that feat of murdering 10 million people.
Was it 10? It wasn't that many, right?
I don't know how many people died. They used to say 18 million.
And they blew all those numbers up.
Well,
anyway,
I think they did. But anyway, just consider it... I mean, if it's a lie, it's their lie, and I'll use it against them.
Fair enough. Hey, thank you, Ricky, for the call tonight. I appreciate it.
So it would take us 666 years to kill for American murderers to kill 10 million people. But whoever developed COVID managed to do it in a couple years' work.
If you want to join the show here, the number is 603-283-6160. So the big news today out of the Supreme Court is that the idea of this student loan forgiveness that Joe Biden was pushing, I think it was last year, and they attempted to actually move forward. It ended up being there was a lawsuit against it, and I believe the lower court put it on hold. So it did not move forward at that point, and now the Supreme Court has weighed in on it. According to the Daily Mail, Supreme Court has now struck down Joe Biden's $400 billion student loan so-called forgiveness plan.
Nice.
In a 6-3 bombshell decision. The plan was
6-3, so at least one of the liberals jumped ship.
Is that right?
I think there's generally considered to be 5-4 split on the court right now. So
they ruled to that the plan to wipe out debts for 26 million Americans at of course, taxpayer expense, was unconstitutional and an overreach of his executive power.
Imagine being the college janitor who got spit on all his life by these students because he didn't have an education, and then he's forced to pay for their education.
I know. It's a total insult.
Just imagine it.
Every productive person in the United States being forced to pay for college students, who many of whom have these liberal arts degrees that they're completely useless.
They study women's studies or creative farting or whatever it is they teach.
So I think this is great news. It's a little bit of good news coming out of the Supreme Court. Every now and then they get something right.
You know the thing that disgusts me is just that they were basically pushing these. It sort of kind of reminds me of the places that push loans on the poor, right? It's
payday loans.
Yeah, payday loans.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. They're pushing these loans on students in the first place.
Sure, they are.
Which is kind of
that they can't go bankrupt from. By the way,
in this immoral way.
And the teachers union has given them 12 years of hard sell on that.
They have.
Grade school
They
and high
have.
school.
They have. But I guess just what I'm thinking is, it's like, on the one hand, it's like I don't know that I feel like you can hold these people who are given these loans to account for those loans. But at the same time, it's like, how do you deal with this problem? Because the taxpayer, I shouldn't be forced to pay for it either, right?
See, I wouldn't be the least bit disappointed if these people didn't pay the banks and the banks went bankrupt and they all committed and all the bankers committed suicide. I'd be pleased as punch by that.
The banks aren't even involved here, right?
The problem is,
they are.
They are involved because, they weren't going to do it unless they could make more money for their banker friends. So the bankers make the loans.
Oh, do they?
The bankers make the profit.
Yeah.
But if anybody doesn't pay, then the government gives them a kickback.
I thought the government,
that's why they'll give you a loan for underwater basket weaving and
the government guarantees the loan, but the banks issue the loan.
Oh, see, I thought the college loans were coming from the government. I thought that was like a government program.
They are sort of coming from the government.
Some of them do.
They are sort of coming from the government. In that the banks get their money from the government through like the FDIC or something along those lines. So it's not. It's kind of weird. It's like,
but
basically
they do go to a government
funnel.
agency, right? And then it's the government agency that contracts with the bank.
Yeah, it's something along those lines. Basically, it's privatized effectively. The issuance of the loan, but those loans are guaranteed by the government, and then the banks are effectively getting the money from the government, so it's to loan out. So because
that's really complicated.
It's like it's a bunch of money printing basically is what's going on. That's how loans come into existence, right? So, yeah.
Well, if they wanted to, they could just wipe out the loans, right? Like they could just forgive the loans and just wipe them off the books if they wanted to, but no, they've got to get them paid, right? They got to pay their bankers.
They could, but then the banks would be out the money. And the job of the government is to take our money and give it to the banks, not the other way around.
Yeah. It's a redistribution of wealth program to the banks.
Yeah.
All right, the number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join the show here. Hour number 2 is coming up, and you can bring up anything that's on your mind. This is Free Talk Live.
The easiest thing in the world for a reader to do is to stop reading, according to the late, great Barney Kilgore, who became managing editor of the Wall Street Journal in 1941 and grew the paper's circulation from 33,000 to 1 million by the 60s. And he'd be pleased to know that his paper is one of the few that people now pay to read online. Someone else pre-internet who realized that attention is fragile? Motown Motown Records founder Berry Gordy. In the early 60s, when his label dominated the charts, he'd bring a dozen real people into the Hitsville, USA studios and audition songs. And he'd ask, if you were down to your last dollar, would you spend it on this record or would you buy a sandwich? Today, attention span seems like an oxymoron. For tips on cutting through the clutter, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan plan, a major setback in his bid to forgive billions of dollars in debt for tens of millions of borrowers. In a 6-3 ruling on Friday, justices rejected his program just minutes after another landmark judgment relating to free speech and LGBTQ rights. FSN's Benji Heyer reports from Washington.
It's a huge loss for the Biden administration. The judgment from the court that the government does not have the ability to wipe out more than a quarter of the country's $1.7 trillion in outstanding federal student debt. The challenge had been brought by 6 states, alleging the campaign pledge amounted to executive overreach, an improper exercise of power. On a busy morning for the justices, also by 6-3, they voted that an anti-discrimination Colorado law cannot require an evangelical Christian web designer to provide same-sex wedding websites. Businesses, says dissenting Judge Sonia Sotomayor, now have a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. A giant step backwards, claims Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, for human rights and equal protection in the United States. Benji Heyer, Washington, D.C.
The U.S. has sent B-52 bombers to the Korean Peninsula in the latest show of strength against North Korea. South Korea says joint military drills with the U.S. are in response to Pyongyang's continued missile tests. FSN's U.S. correspondent William Denzelo reports.
According to Seoul's defense ministry, the US nuclear-capable bombers participated in aerial drills with South Korean jets. This comes after the US deployed a nuclear-powered submarine to the Korean peninsula earlier this month, as Washington continues to increase the visibility of its strategic assets. The US and its allies have repeatedly called on North Korea to abandon its nuclear and missile programs. Pyongyang accuses Washington of planning an invasion and has conducted over 100 tests since the start of last year. Last weekend, mass rallies were held in the capital to mark the 73rd anniversary of the Korean War. William Denzelo, New York.
An air quality alert has been issued for all 5 boroughs in New York City as the smog from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket the Big Apple. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Friday's air quality readings topped 150, and with readings at that level, officials recommend that people with heart or lung diseases and children reduce their exposure to the smog, meaning stay indoors. It is expected that the smog moves out of the city by late Friday. Jody Jacobs, New York.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. The British government has been forced back to the drawing board over its controversial proposals to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Court of Appeal in London ruled that it would be unlawful for the government to process asylum claims in the African nation, arguing it is not a safe country for migrants seeking leave to relocate to Britain, despite assurances provided by the Rwandan government. Jacqueline McKenzie is with the UK law firm Lee Day and specialises in migration and human rights cases.
The assurances regarding the arrangements for people to be, to go to Rwanda just weren't good enough, effectively. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And I suppose, given that the government has said they're going to appeal, what we'll probably see is this government either looking for another country, because I don't think Rwanda is going to be able to address all the safeguarding issues that are actually raised in the details. We've got the headlines, but if you look at the detail, there are a number of safeguarding issues, or hopefully it may just scrap the plan altogether.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak indicated he is not ready to do that and plans to try and overturn Thursday's ruling, with Number 10 Downing Street hoping the country's Supreme Court paves the way for deportation flights to Rwanda to begin ahead of the country's next general election. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. The U.S. Supreme Court strikes down President Biden's student loan plan, a major setback in his bid to forgive billions of dollars in debt. The U.S. sends B-52 bombers to the Korean Peninsula in Washington's latest show of strength against North Korea. And New York City issues an air quality alert as the smog from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket the Big Apple. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
Jared Gilchrist was surfing when he was attacked by a shark that took his leg. Thanks for being with us, big guy.
Thanks, this is tight.
What was going through your mind when you first realized that you were there with a shark all alone in open water?
I felt like a total badass. It bit into my leg and started shaking it back and forth, and at that point I just felt, yes, this is sweet.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to see the teeth sinking into your leg like.
It was sick. At one point I just saw my leg just floating there in the water. It was awesome.
Okay, we're joined now via satellite by Dr. Brian Caddy. What condition was Jared's leg in when you first saw him?
It was in pretty rough shape. The shark had scissored through the muscle, and it was all just like hanging off the bone. It was nuts.
Yeah, I kept touching it. It was slimy as hell.
Yeah, totally. It was insane.
Well, doctor, how do you deal with something like this?
Well, you're never fully prepared for an injury this freaking cool. We just tried to stop the blood loss, and we took a bunch of photos because it's hysterical to freak out the nurses with gnarly shit like this.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, hour number 2. We're kicking it off right now. The number, if you want to join the show, it's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian and Chris. Unfortunately, nobody had to leave for the rest of the evening. The number here again, 603-283-6160. We were talking about the Supreme Court that has struck down the plan to spend $400 billion taxpayer dollars on student loan forgiveness. And that is dead now. The Supreme Court ruling 6-3, according to the Daily Mail. In this particular case, the plan would have eradicated $10,000 in debt for borrowers that are earning less than $125,000 and $20,000, or rather up to $20,000 for those with Pell Grants. It was challenged by 6 Republican states and 2 borrowers who argued that Biden should have sought approval from Congress for a plan using substantial taxpayer funds. The Chief Justice in the Supreme Court agreed and said in the majority opinion that that the move, quote, requires that Congress speak clearly before a Department of Education secretary can unilaterally alter large sections of the American economy. And, of course, Joe Biden, not very happy about it, called the decision disappointing and wrong and vowed to fight back in a statement released hours after the ruling came down. He said, "The fight is not over. I'll have more to announce when I address the nation this afternoon. My administration's student debt relief plan would have been the lifeline tens of millions of hardworking Americans needed as they try to recover from a once-in-a-century pandemic." As though that has anything to do with their college loans.
I mean, part of the problem is that there's an oversupply of college-educated individuals in the wrong career paths. You can't go to college and then expect to get paid, a higher salary when you graduate if you don't take into account where the demand for good-paying jobs are, right? Like, the whole basket weaving thing is a perfect example. I mean, I don't even know if that's a real thing, but the point is,
it probably was somewhere.
Yeah. The point is that you actually do have to think about the skills that you're going to achieve, from those funds that you're exerting if you want them to basically eventually be beneficial to you.
Right. The theory is you are investing in yourself, right? You're bettering yourself to make you more attractive in a job market, to make you more attractive to potential employers, in theory. And so the idea is that the degree makes you more desirable, maybe would make it so you make more money. At least that's the pitch that they sell to these kids. And I think it is important to remember that this is a sales pitch, that they are pitching a product. They are pitching a service to very young people who don't have a lot of experience when it comes to what a loan is. You're not allowed to get a loan until you're age 18 in the United States, and that's the same time they're hitting you up to get a $100,000 loan or whatever for college.
The funny thing about this is they're effectively selling to 16 and 17-year-olds primarily. That's the market for this.
That's right.
And they wouldn't be able to get a loan if it wasn't for the government guarantees.
That's a great point.
And they wouldn't.
They have no credit.
Right. They have no credit. Right. It's it just always blows my mind that it's not really. I don't think I will say that I think college is overrated, but I don't necessarily think that there's no value in getting a higher education. The problem is that people are getting a education in something that isn't worth something in the marketplace.
Right.
So, if I were to go in, I don't know, maybe I'm trying to think of maybe if I was to go and, into physics, some sort of physicist or chemistry or something where there is often the STEM, what they call STEM, scientific,
technology,
engineering, right?
Math,
something like that. Those jobs are almost certainly going to be worth, those degrees are almost certainly going to be worth more than you pay in terms of, or loan, you get a loan for and you pay for. But a lot of these other degrees that people come out with, all you're doing,
unless you become a teacher, you're not going to be able to do anything with it.
Yeah, even if you can do something with it, if the cost of the loan exceeds what you're going to make additionally, in theory, and it doesn't cover those costs, it doesn't make sense. Right. And it's
and
just,
people shouldn't do things that don't make financial sense. And if you do something that doesn't make financial sense, you should be the one. Solely you should be the one responsible for paying the cost of making that mistake. You screwed up. You got to pay the price, not everybody else.
Yeah. Part of the reason that in a sane world, it wouldn't be that young people couldn't get loans, but those loans would be tied to the ability.
They'd be reasonable.
Well, they would be reasonable, but they'd also be tied to the ability of those individuals for the career path that they've chosen to go down to actually be able to repay those loans. Because if they can't repay those loans, the issuer of those loans will never make money because they'd end up defaulting on them. But they've undermined the whole free market system, basically, by guaranteeing those loans in the first place.
Well, and as we discussed last night, the fact that the government just guarantees these loans out there essentially means that the colleges can keep raising their rates. There's no end. It doesn't matter the fact that there are a number of colleges. In theory, they should be competing and rates should be coming down. But instead, they can cartelize and just everybody just knows they can raise their rates. And there's no penalty to them for raising the rates because kids are still being brainwashed to want to go to college. So there's still high demand on their services. They know that they can get whatever amount they want for their services because the government's going to back it up. So there's no downward pressure. There's no reason for them to do better and lower costs.
So I it's interesting. So I went to college and I remember, high school. I mean, this is in like I'm trying to think. This would be
20 years ago.
It would have been like 2000, probably around the 2000. I graduated in 2003 from high school.
Okay.
So 2001, 2002 probably is sort of the time period. But I remember taking classes and, they really emphasizing college. I mean, the whole school emphasized college. This is a public school in New Jersey. And they emphasized college, and they had classes and things. And I don't know if it was a class that I took or whatever it was, but that they pushed on you. But one of the things that they never talked about was the fiscal aspect of picking a career path or picking a college, that you'd actually end up with something of value that would pay for itself. It was just
what do you want to do? Do whatever you want.
Right. It was just a flat out go to college. The average. It was something like their sales pitch was something like
you make $1 million.
Well, it was something like their argument and the defense is, and I think they're still using this as a defense of, well, the average college kid still makes more as a result of going to college. That's
the
true.
Claim.
That's true, maybe, but it sort of overlooks the fact that a good percentage of those are actually worse off as a result of taking those loans out. They
don't factor in the college loan, I don't think, when they make that statement. I think they're just saying this person, quote unquote, makes more, meaning that their paycheck is higher than someone who graduated high school. But how much of that paycheck is going to pay the college loan off for 30 years or whatever?
Well, that's true. I think in some situations they are talking about the again, this is average. But the problem is that also means that there's a lot of people who make a lot more, right? Like it's definitely worth going to college because they're getting skills
and they bring
that
the average
increase.
up.
Right. So it skews the fact that, yes, maybe on average, but that means there's still a lot of people that are taking these loans and they're actually going to be worse off as a result, right? Yeah.
I got to give Biden some credit here, though. He does make an interesting counterpoint in his statement that he made about this. He says it would have been good for economic growth, both in the short and long term. I don't necessarily agree with that. But then he goes on. This is the part I think is interesting. He says the hypocrisy of Republican elected officials is stunning. They had no problem with billions in pandemic-related loans to businesses, including hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of dollars for their own businesses, and those loans were forgiven. So he is making a good point here that during the so-called pandemic, Republicans were more than happy to hand out, in some cases, I think it was in total, like hundreds of billions of dollars in loans that went out to companies both large and small all across the United States. And then as long as the terms of the loans were satisfied, they were able to just simply waive them. And I don't think that meant the taxpayers paid again for those loans later on. I think it just meant they wiped them off the books, which is not what they were talking about doing here with the college loans.
Well, effectively what happened there, I'm pretty sure this is what's going on in that situation, is that let's say we do this again, right? Let's say we're going to waive these loans for these college students. Well, what does that actually mean? It very well could mean that we're going to continue on with 18% inflation rate.
Sure.
Because that's basically what was going on when they were giving out all this money and they were printing all this money for the businesses.
Right.
You're going to keep having that happen, and then that's going to have negative economic consequences. It's
bad any way you slice it.
Right.
There's no doubt about it.
It wasn't good when they did it, when they were doing this for the businesses. It wasn't good when they were doing it for the college students. It was none of these things they should be doing. This is not what government should be doing.
But he is right that the Republicans were totally fine with the other loans.
It's not a Republican or Democrat issue. It's they all do it. All of these politicians do it.
Right, and that's because it's political.
Yeah, it might be a little different, it might be that and the funny part about it is it will be like the Republicans will introduce something that does the same thing that the Democrats did. It might be the exact same thing. Like maybe it's war, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when the Republicans are in power and they introduce something, the Democrats will be against it. But then when the Democrats come into power, it reverses for the exact same sort of thing, funding war, right? Or something along those lines.
Yeah, now the Republicans are quote unquote skeptical of wars. I'm not going to go and call them anti-war, but if they start the war, then it's totally fine, as we've seen. And the poll numbers bear it out. The Republicans are now, after 20 years, still, I believe it's a majority of them support the war in Iraq, what George W. Bush did 20 years ago. But fewer of them. It used to be like 80+%. Now it's like 50-something percent of the Republicans. But they still support it, while a minority of Republicans support the Ukraine thing, I think. Or it might be like 50% of Republicans.
Yeah,
and 80% of Democrats support the Ukraine thing. So it's just the complete opposite.
Yeah, it's literally we have a society in which we've got two different cults. And
totally.
it doesn't matter that they're basically one and the same. But you're going to do whatever your cult tells you to do, regardless of whether or not it makes any sense.
Yeah, you won't think about it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was the same thing the Republicans were doing, 6 months ago. If the Democrats now want to do it, and you were against it 6 months ago because you were following the Democrats back then, well, now all of a sudden you want it, and it's like, it's so disgusting.
If you want to join the show here, the number is 603-283-6160. Maybe you want to take the side of the college loan forgiveness. I would love to hear your arguments on this. Again, the Supreme Court ruling 6-3 today to crush Biden's plan to pay off. I mean, it wouldn't pay off all the loans. It would only have been $10,000 for most people, right? So it wouldn't have even taken care of, I think, most people's loans. Probably. I mean, what's the average college loan? It's got to be like 50 or something like that, wouldn't you think?
It was like $200,000 for college in 2005-ish time period.
200,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends on where you go.
It depends on. Okay, so take into consideration that some states subsidize their education, so what you're sort of paying isn't that, but you've paid it through taxes, or your parents have paid it through taxes. But yeah, it's probably something like $200,000. And I'll just give you an example. So New Jersey doesn't, or at least when back in the day when I was going to college, New Jersey wasn't funding its higher education. Pennsylvania was funding its higher education. It costs me. I lived in New Jersey. It cost me out-of-state tuition in Pennsylvania was basically the same as it would be for in-state in New Jersey.
Okay, so wait, you went to school in Pennsylvania?
Yes. Okay. And the reason is because in-state tuition in Pennsylvania was something like $2,000 versus like $10,000 for out-of-state.
Per semester?
Per semester. But that doesn't include all the costs. That's just the tuition figure. So it doesn't include books. It doesn't include room and board, that kind of thing.
I see. And it ended up being $200,000?
Yeah, that's going to include like room and board and books and everything, but something along those lines. Yeah. And it also does vary a lot, but in terms of like different colleges, in terms of costs, but often the costs are sort of misleading because like private schools are the prices are higher, but you almost always get a lot more grants, and not loans, but grants. So you're not really paying that full price, if that makes any sense. Okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
It is.
It's crazy. So, I mean, $10,000 would have been a drop in the bucket to some extent for some of these people.
Oh yeah,
with these loans.
It's a joke. It's probably more of a PR stunt.
That's absolutely what it is. Right. Yeah. That's why I was saying this is political. So. The Republicans, of course, are for the business loans. They're fine with that because they want to be pro-business. And the Democrats are for the paying off the college loans, or $10,000 of it, because they know that that's going to be mostly liberals. They know that the college graduates are going to be their constituency, and so they want to, make sure they're solid on the Democrat side. Like, we tried. And now they'll still be able to say, we tried, but those darn Republicans, we tried to help.
What it comes down to is they're buying votes, right?
Straight
up buying votes. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's there's no other better way to describe what's going on here.
Yep.
They're buying votes.
Let's go to the phones here, and then there's another big Supreme Court decision that came out today. It has to do with LGBTQ people and businesses, whether they can serve them or refuse to serve them. We'll get into that here. But Bad Slave is on the line in New Hampshire. Go ahead, Bad Slave.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Chris and Ian. I'm hoping for really, really good results for you, Ian, in this whole mess of the Crypto 6 or what's left of it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, there you go. Anyways, but I wanted to say about education, and I cover the board on it, with what I call government INDOC, which of course is, commonly known as public schools, and academia, further on in the process. All this stuff is completely pulled out of the market, controlling realm, which means all of this stuff is excessively expensive.
Yeah, what you're saying, I think, is that these government schools or these universities are not subject to true market forces, and this is something that I was talking about earlier, where the prices in a free market, as we see in industries that are less regulated or unregulated, tends to go down. Price goes down because of competition, and people get better at doing the things that they do, or the manufacturing, or whatever. Costs go down over time. It's just sort of the natural tendency of a competitive marketplace. But those things do not occur in the college education marketplace, because it is a highly restrictive market. The players all are getting government subsidies, and so they're playing it up to raise their prices so they can get even more of the money from the government in these cases. So it's backwards incentives.
They have a pattern, Ian, of starting with the public schools, and we're breaking people over the coals in exactly the same way, and in fact, I mean, to me, everything that's IT, which is most of what colleges and government schools do, is IT. It's IT, information technology, delivery of data. Delivery of data has gotten so cheap in these days that, I mean, basically,
Are you saying, just to clarify, are you saying that the colleges aren't teaching IT? You're saying that they're just delivering information to people and we don't need them anymore. You could just do the research yourself, go online, get free courses and things like that? I
think a lot of that is true, but I mean, even if they were to have the organizations surrounding these things, that the proper delivery of IT is going to be a really inexpensive, operation, and just I'm
not really sure what you mean when you say the proper delivery of IT. That's confusing to me.
Data, it's a matter of, you got data in your computer at home, and you got data somewhere out on the in the cloud, I guess you call it, and you just bring that in, with the.
What does that have to do with the colleges, though?
Well, exactly. Not the colleges, but I mean, if people were smart, this is what would be going on.
Okay. Hey, you kind of lost me on this one. Thank you for the call tonight, Bad Slave. And you looked kind of confused there, too,
I was
Chris.
very confused.
Yeah, I was trying real hard there, but no.
I don't know if he was saying that you could learn IT on your own, which I can't.
You could, yeah.
It's not. I would say that I did prior to going to college for computer science, but basically IT. Yeah, it's not. I was very, in fact, I was very disappointed with the basically incompetency of, education at the college level. I mean, it was maybe bad at like lower levels, but it was pretty bad at the college level too. So
as far as in that field,
yeah, I mean, I went to study something that I already really kind of knew. I felt like I came out knowing in some respects less than when I went in. Like it was that it was kind of that bad. And I will say this: I don't necessarily think that the people I graduated with who went in knowing nothing didn't gain something. I think they did, but it was still bad. The whole process, and professors that didn't know what the heck was going on, what the heck they were talking about. You can't lecture an hour to me on something I know everything. I know a lot about, and then it takes me half an hour to figure out what you're talking about, and then once I figure out what you're talking about it, and I realize you just don't know what you're talking about, right? Like I literally there was one professor who talked about PVRs for 45 minutes before I raised my hand, and he was confusing it with VPNs, and he couldn't explain what a VPN was.
Oh, God.
And
it's embarrassing.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, I am talking about VPNs when I questioned it, and yeah, it was just the whole thing was. But this wasn't that abnormal.
All right, we got more coming up here, and you can join the show as well. The number is 603-283-6160. You can bring up anything you want. The third Supreme Court ruling. We got to talk about that coming up.
Free Talk Live.
That's all libertarians are saying is let's stop the violence. And really, when you put it in those terms, it sounds kind of liberal. Let's stop the violence.
Sure,
right?
it's a movement about peace and personal responsibility. That could very easily sound like, when you use the word peace, sounds liberal, know?
Right. So if the first libertarian you ever meet or hear on the radio is just talking about making government smaller, I can totally understand why you would get confused and think that it's just a bunch of ultra-right wingers. That's one of the reasons why I kind of shy away from labeling myself that way.
Often we get terms like radical used towards us, but radical, really? Peace, personal responsibility, voluntary interaction between individuals? That's radical? I'll tell you what's radical. Radical's using a gun and a bunch of guys in armored suits with helmets to enforce your will on people.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan plan, a major setback in his bid to forgive billions of dollars in debt for tens of millions of borrowers. In a 6-3 ruling on Friday, justices rejected his program just minutes after another landmark judgment relating to free speech and LGBTQ rights. FSN's Benji Heyer reports from Washington.
It's a huge loss for the Biden administration. The judgment from the court that the government does not have the ability to wipe out more than a quarter of the country's $1.7 trillion in outstanding federal student debt. The challenge had been brought by 6 states, alleging the campaign pledge amounted to executive overreach, an improper exercise of power. On a busy morning for the justices, also by 6-3, they voted that an anti-discrimination Colorado law cannot require an evangelical Christian web designer to provide same-sex wedding websites. Businesses, says dissenting Judge Sonia Sotomayor, now have a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. A giant step backwards, claims Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, for human rights and equal protection in the United States. Benji Heyer, Washington, D.C.
The U.S. has sent B-52 bombers to the Korean Peninsula in the latest show of strength against North Korea. South Korea says joint military drills with the U.S. are in response to Pyongyang's continued missile tests. FSN's U.S. correspondent William Denzelo reports.
According to Seoul's defense ministry, the US nuclear-capable bombers participated in aerial drills with South Korean jets. This comes after the US deployed a nuclear-powered submarine to the Korean peninsula earlier this month, as Washington continues to increase the visibility of its strategic assets. The US and its allies have repeatedly called on North Korea to abandon its nuclear and missile programs. Pyongyang accuses Washington of planning an invasion and has conducted over 100 tests since the start of last year. Last weekend, mass rallies were held in the capital to mark the 73rd anniversary of the Korean War. William Denslow, New York.
An air quality alert has been issued for all 5 boroughs in New York City as the smog from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket the Big Apple. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Friday's air quality reading stopped 150. And with readings at that level, officials recommend that people with heart or lung diseases and children reduce their exposure to the smog, meaning stay indoors. It is expected that the smog moves out of the city by late Friday. Jody Jacobs, New York.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is...
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can still weigh in on the college discussion, especially if you have feelings or thoughts you want to share on the Supreme Court shutting down. Before it even got started, the idea of this college loan so-called forgiveness, which of course would have been paid for by dollar holders. Now, I don't know if it would have been taxpayers or if they would have just straight up printed the $400 billion that they needed, which of course inflated the money supply.
Yeah,
and then everyone holding on to dollars would have paid the price.
And it's kind of interesting because it does sort of affect the economy sort of in a different way, right? Like, as opposed to affecting,
depending on how it's formed, you mean?
Well, whether or not you put the burden on taxpayers directly, or you put the burden on all of society by inflating, the money supply, right? So
yeah, it's not clear how exactly it would have been funded.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, would one be a better method? Like, if they're gonna do it, let's say they're gonna do it, like, would one method be better than the other, right? Like, and I don't know if there is an answer to that, but it's just like, it's just kind of an interesting question of like, would you?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know.
But it's not going to happen, at least not at this point. So the next story here is from Axios.com, reporting that the Supreme Court has also ruled that businesses can refuse service to LGBTQ customers, which I have to say was a surprise after many years of you got to bake the cake rulings coming out of courts and such.
Wasn't the you gotta bake a cake ruling, didn't they roll the right way and effectively say you don't have to bake the cake?
They?
I thought at the end.
Maybe you're right about that.
I might be mistaken, but I thought they did roll similarly, and it was a good ruling, but I could be mistaken.
Well, in this case, businesses can refuse to serve same-sex couples if doing so would violate the owner's religious beliefs, according to the Supreme Court today.
The only thing I would say is I'm not sure I like the fact that it is if it violates the religious beliefs, right? Like, why should it matter whether they're religious beliefs or not, right?
Why can't it just be they're a bigot?
Right, like, I should be able to serve whoever I want, whether
or not,
right, or not. This is not, we should have, and the only, I think there's circumstances where this is not, it would not be okay to refuse to serve potentially, but it's the result of government intervention in the market, or, like, for example, the banks, right? The banks are heavily regulated. If you can't open a competing bank to serve LGBT people, and the government is saying the banks can't serve LGBT people or whatever, like, because it's regulated, well, you're basically screwing over a population that has no way into the system in the first place. There's no market solution to the problem because it's regulated.
The story here says the case concerns Lori Smith, a Colorado web designer who wanted to create and sell wedding websites, but not to same-sex couples. Colorado's civil rights law, which wasn't Colorado the place with the bakery as well? I think it was.
I feel like it was the gay,
too, yeah. The gay bakery.
I don't know for sure, though.
Or not the gay bakery, the bakery run by the Christian guy.
Was it run? I guess it was run by a Christian guy.
Yeah, I think so.
I know the baker was like a Christian guy or something. Yeah.
Colorado's civil rights law prohibited her or any business that serves the general public from turning away customers because of their sexual orientation. She said complying with that law would force her to espouse views that she doesn't agree with.
She says the artwork I create is speech, she told Colorado Public Radio in December, adding that, quote, those messages must be consistent with my convictions, she said. The conservative majority Supreme Court ruled 6-3 in favor of Smith, saying she has a First Amendment right to refuse to design custom wedding websites for same-sex couples. Quote, the First Amendment envisions the United States as a rich and complex place where all persons are free to think and speak as they wish, not as the government demands. Colorado cannot deny that promise consistent with the First Amendment, according to the Judge Neil Gorsuch in the majority opinion. And I agree with this here because ultimately, and I'm also with you on this, Chris, whether it's her religion or not, she should be free to not speak if that's what she wants to do. And, you know, web designing is speech, right? Like she's pouring out her creativity onto the page on the internet. And just because you come in with $1,000 and you want to hire this person does not mean that that person is obligated to take your money and write the things you want her to write on the internet.
We're not slaves, and we shouldn't be slaves.
Well, I mean, that's not the same thing as slavery. You'd be getting paid, but ultimately you should not be obligated to espouse a thing that you don't agree with.
I feel like it's got an element of slavery to it, but I know what you mean. So let me clarify something. Is this a U.S. Supreme Court ruling we're talking about?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because it's sort of conflicting, right? Logically conflicting with other rulings that have occurred over the years. So just as an example, commercial speech is not protected the way other types of political speech is protected, which sort of means this ruling seems inconsistent. Like, why is it okay?
What's another example though, like commercial
I'm trying to
speech?
think, and maybe I'm just thinking about this, and are
we talking about advertising cigarettes?
Yeah, like I'm thinking about maybe advertising cigarettes. Probably is a good example where it's okay for the government to regulate that, but it's not okay for the government to regulate. You know,
there's
you know what I
certainly
mean?
no
Like,
consistency.
It seems like it's
That's
inconsistent in terms of the logic and the rationale.
I guess the difference there would be no one can advertise cigarettes, period, across the board, whereas this is just saying the individual business owner can't be forced to take clients that they don't want. So it's not the same circumstance.
It's not exactly the same, but it seems so similar.
Yeah, I mean, it is a similar restriction in that if I'm a billboard,
like kind of like a hypocritical kind of.
It's totally hypocritical.
Yeah.
If I'm a billboard owner and I want to rent my billboard to Marlboro cigarettes, I should be able to do that. That's just, that should be a marketplace action. It should be free. It should be unrestricted, unless people protest and, then I decide to change my mind about it. But yeah, the government shouldn't be involved in that, in that transaction.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's probably a little bit in error the way it's being described, just in that the government doesn't technically prohibit you from renting to Marlboro. They're prohibiting Marlboro from putting up advertising to advertise their cigarettes. So
yeah, I guess you're probably right about that.
Yeah. It doesn't. Everybody understood what you were saying, but
I wonder though. Like, they wouldn't come after the magazine who took Marlboro's money. They would only go after Marlboro in that case. I don't know about that because I can tell you
that's
that
interesting.
in certain cases,
I'm not 100% sure. You might be right.
As I understand it, like there's certain things we can't advertise on broadcast radio. It used to be like gambling, for instance.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know if that applies these days because things have loosened up on certain types of gambling. But there's certain areas where you got to be really careful because they can come after you for it. Or like the SEC, for instance, coming after people, Hollywood stars, just for promoting a cryptocurrency on their Twitter account.
Sure. Yep.
So
I think you're right. I think there's some inconsistency in the law too, probably, depending on what we're talking about specifically. Certainly banks are liable for, which really seems messed up, but liable for the transactions that customers do to overseas gambling sites.
That's correct. But the customer is not.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it's not 100% necessarily the case. It could be it's just the billboard owner even, or it could be both even.
Yeah. I don't know. If you know and you want to weigh in here, please. The number is 603-283-6160. We're talking about a case with a web designer in Colorado who apparently has some kind of religious beliefs, and she doesn't like them gays getting married, so she doesn't want to be hired by gay couples because she sells wedding websites, because I guess that's a thing, wedding websites. The court ruled that persons are free to think and speak as they wish, not as the government demands, said Neil Gorsuch, saying further in the majority opinion, quote, the opportunity to think for ourselves and express those thoughts freely is among our most cherished liberties and part of what keeps our republic strong, he said.
You know, the other thing about this is, like, why would I want, I'm a gay man, why would I want to hire or force somebody to take my money who doesn't want to provide a product or service? Like,
I've never understood this.
Like, it doesn't even really make a whole lot of sense to me. It just seems so mind-bogglingly dumb.
In the case of the, I believe it was the Colorado cake maker, if I recall correctly, it was a lawyer who was like looking to file this lawsuit. They were pushing.
So
these were activists.
It's a financial thing move.
I think
on
it
part,
was.
maybe.
Well, and also there's a certain type of activist, and obviously you're not this kind of gay individual. You know, you're kind of like the leave me alone kind of gay, but you're not the I'm going to push my beliefs on you kind of person. And there are those people out there who who believe that they should have a right to someone else's services simply because they can breathe, I guess. I don't know. And that is a really inappropriate viewpoint to have, because, like, why would these gay couples that want to force the cake maker to make their cake, would they want to do whatever it is that they do for some bigoted hick or whatever? Like if they're doing haircuts, and some bigoted hick comes into their hair cutting salon and starts insulting their customers and insulting their hair cutters.
Yeah.
And then it says, well, you all gotta serve me, you gays. And then, are you gonna kick the guy out of the business? Of course you're gonna kick him out.
You know what's funny about this too is, like, I think about it in terms of my business, and I basically have a policy with my business.
Which you sell computer parts.
We sell computers.
ThinkPenguin.com.
Yep, computers and computer parts and accessories. But, effectively, my thoughts on this are, like, for our policies, we'll do business with anybody who wants to buy, stuff from us, right? Like,
well, in your case, you don't even know who the people are for the most part, right? Like, they're just orders that come in from the internet.
Largely, I mean. We can see if somebody orders like say a government, right? Like orders, places an order, and they're a government URL for the email address that's entered, right? Okay. Like, we could theoretically go in and cancel the order, or something. Right, exactly. Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, even though we sort of have a policy where we will serve basically anybody, and I don't care who you are, right, or what you represent, we'll serve you. But there is a line that we certainly draw, in that if you call us up and you ask to speak to management, right, and I'm on the line with you, for example, and you're telling me my employee, like, did something. This actually happened at one point. Where I had watched him open the box. Like, so let's say it's a computer repair. It was some sort of repair of some kind. And he opened the box, and I had watched him open the box, and the laptop I think it was like a laptop, and it was just in the box without any packaging or anything.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, but there was all sorts of issues with the laptop, and the issue that it was sent in for, the RMA, was something like to fix some issue. So we fixed that issue, but there was, like, grime all over the screen, and
oh god,
and it was gross, right? We probably shouldn't have warranted it at all, but whatever. We fixed the issue, we sent it back to him, but we didn't fix the screen, so to speak, because technically it wasn't under warrant. It wouldn't have been warrantable issue anyway, because it wasn't a defect. It was like in an abusive environment.
Was dirty.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so the customer got mad because you didn't clean up the screen.
No,
for him?
The customer had the nerve to ask for management to complain that the employee had lied or had done something to the laptop to like destroy the screen or something. And
they were claiming it wasn't them.
Right. And I'm like, I literally saw him open this laptop up.
Right.
And or open the box that the laptop was in, and it was like jostling around. Like you could shake this thing, and I don't know how it was working at all when you turned it on. But the point is simply that if you lie to me, if you're lying to me, especially about an employee,
blacklist them.
Right,
blacklist them.
Oh, there's zero chance that you're going to get serviced. We're not going to fix your stuff. We're going to make a note. We're going to make a comment about your
Dishonest.
order and your And if you try to get service, we're not going to give you. It's certainly not priority service. We're not going to make you a priority when we go to do business with you, either now or in the future. We're going to take that into consideration, and we're going to say, hey, maybe we would fix your computer again, but we wouldn't necessarily go out of the way to do extra stuff if it's not in the warranty explicitly. And but what I mean by this is, we often go out of the way beyond what the warranty technically, is in the warranty. So
you want customers to remark that they had a really great experience, that that you did more than was expected, and that's an important important thing to have.
But we're not going to go beyond the contract, the terms of the contract. If you're going to lie to me about an employee and try to get an employee in trouble.
And furthermore, if it were me, I'd blacklist the guy. Like if I know that there's a dishonest customer and they're not apologetic or whatever, right? Like they're a problem customer. They're going to keep being a problem customer. It's like, I don't need your money. You can just not buy from me ever again. Your account's going on a blacklist. If you place any more orders, we're just not going to fill those orders. We'll honor our contracts for what you bought, but we're not under any obligation to sell you any more computers or any other parts ever again.
Right. And that's an interesting question. And I'm trying to think if we've ever gone so far as to completely cut somebody off. And I feel like we probably have, but it
ain't worth it.
Yeah, but you're right. There are certain customers.
The customer is not always right.
Right. That it's you're absolutely. You may not be able to. There was only one time where I hung up on a customer, and actually it was the employee. It was that whole situation with the customer telling me an employee, and he phrased it in such a way that I'm like, I can't respond to this without telling the customer you're a liar and being like. So I'm just I just hung up on the guy.
Wow.
But I've never hung up on any other person that I can think of.
That's a good story, Chris.
Yeah. It's but this is why it's important that people have they have the right to deny service.
Yes, they should. And they shouldn't have to have a any kind of excuse. You shouldn't have to explain yourself. You should just be able to deny service for any reason you want. And that does lead me to wonder about this particular ruling by the Supreme Court, where it has specifically to do with so-called LGBTQ, and the case was regarding same-sex couples who wanted to hire a website designer to make a marriage website, and she didn't want to. Does this mean that she could also refuse to make a website for an Italian if she didn't like Italians? Or could she refuse to, you see what I'm saying? Is it only for people who are LGBTQ, or can this particular ruling by the Supreme Court be interpreted to say that if it's against your religion, because apparently that's the qualifier here, if it's against your religion, can you refuse to serve other types of people?
Can I refuse to pay my taxes because it's against my religion?
I suspect not. But, that'd be great if you could. Here's more. So Gorsuch said, quote, all of us will encounter ideas we consider unattractive, but added that, quote, tolerance, not coercion, is our nation's answer. Boy, wouldn't that be nice if that were actually true, if coercion was not the answer from the government, right? Because that's all they ever do. If they don't like your ideas, if they don't like what you're doing, then they will absolutely use coercion on you. That's why our co-host Arya is sitting in a prison cell for the next 18 months.
For sure.
Because that was all about ideas. It had nothing to do with any victim or anything like that. It was about their idea that you have to get their piece of paper
fill out their forms and jump through all of their hoops. That's their idea, not ours.
Yeah, I love the phrase paperwork violation, and
that's what it was.
Yeah, I remember hearing that in the court as how I believe it was. I think it was your lawyer who described it that way. And I was thinking that is such a good description of like what's going on here. These are paperwork violations. If you're going to say guilty, it's not anything more than a paperwork violation, and the penalty should be little more than probably a very, very small fine. Maybe a $50 fine or something like that. Times what? Well, I guess in your case it would have been maybe 7 people, but it's just yeah.
There was a dissenting opinion, of course. Again, it was a 6-3 rule. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote in the dissent, quote, "There has been a backlash to the movement for liberty and equality for gender and sexual minorities. New forms of inclusion have been met with reactionary exclusion. This is heartbreaking." Well, that's not really an argument. It's just an opinion. Well, I guess that's all the Supreme Court ever issues is opinions. But usually they have some sort of legal backing to them. She's just saying this hurts her feelings ultimately. And this isn't about the liberty. It's not liberty to go and tell a business owner they have to do what you want them to do if they don't want to do it. That's not what liberty is. Okay, that's using the threat of the state and saying, if you don't bake this cake or you don't make this website for me, then I'm going to go to some men with guns and I'm going to force you to do it. That's the opposite of liberty. That's coercion.
I think there's some other aspect of this, the opposite of that too, I think is also probably important to point out here is you also, as a business, shouldn't be required to, for example, like if you're in the auto manufacturing world, right, there's a lot of regulations, and often they mandate that you use a particular part from a particular company effectively. And this happens in a lot of industries, and that's also just as wrong.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely. Ketanji Brown Jackson and Elena Kagan on the dissent said further, the immediate symbolic effect of the decision is to mark gays and lesbians for second-class status. She said the ruling conveyed a message that, quote, "we live in a society with social castes," and warned that the underpinning logic of the decision could extend beyond sexual orientation or gender identity. And that's good if that's the case. Now, I'm not saying it's good to discriminate.
You might want to be careful about your words there.
I'm saying it's good if indeed it would be legal to discriminate. And the reason for that is because discrimination is a natural thing. We all do it, okay? I discriminate against who I'm friends with, for instance. I don't want to be friends with everybody. I just want to be friends with the right people.
And it's not even like you necessarily think that just because you don't want to be friends with somebody that there's anything wrong with them or that you dislike them. It's just that maybe you don't have the same interests, right?
That could be. So we all discriminate in our daily affairs. Some people discriminate for really bad reasons, right? Like they might discriminate against somebody because of their gender or because of their skin color or whatever. I'm against those sorts of discriminations personally.
But these are moral issues. You don't have to put into law just because something is immoral. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to outlaw it just because you wouldn't do it. Right. And I think that's the key thing here. It's like, yeah, maybe they should serve that gay couple, but you shouldn't use violence to force that business owner to serve that gay couple.
Right. And it doesn't have anything to do with creating a caste system. There's no I don't know if caste system. I mean, I don't live in India, so I don't know a whole lot about the caste systems there or the Hindu religion or whatever it is. I suspect the government's involved in that, right? Where there's a certain system and the government enforces it.
Historically, it was.
Let me know if I'm wrong about this. I mean, I've read a little bit about it over the years, but I'm not intimately familiar with it. That would be a caste system. This is simply social interactions between human beings who can make different decisions. This is a marketplace. This is people choosing for various different reasons, whether it be religious, whether they're just ignorant, or whether they're bigoted for whatever other reason they happen to be. They should be free to make those choices, and the rest of us should also be free to make choices. So maybe I wouldn't want, knowing about this woman and her web design, I can do some web stuff, but I'm not a pro at it. Maybe I want to hire somebody to do some web work. and I catch wind that this lady is discriminating against LGBTQ couples, and I say to myself, you know what? There's 10 other people here in this town in Colorado that can do web design, and 9 of the 10 of them, they don't care if you're LGBTQ. So I'm going to call up the other 9 and see who gives me the best price, and I'm going to hire them instead. And you let the marketplace decide these things. If this lady lives in a particularly religious area, and instead it's like 9 out of the 10 people are like her, and they're bigoted, like there's only one unbigoted person who will sell a website to anybody if you can just pay him for it, then he's going to get all of the LGBTQ business as well as everybody else who supports
You're
them.
right, but let's say there aren't any businesses, right? Well, that's exactly why we need human freedom, so that people who are LGBTQ are free to get up and move, and the government can't come in and tie you to somebody like a parent or whatever. Anybody should be able to get up and move wherever they want, where they're going to be welcomed.
This is true. Hour number 3 is on the way. You can join the show, 603-283-6160 here on Free Talk Live.
I've been told no in many different ways.
I give you an order and you're going to obey it.
George, you can go this way. You can do that and you have to leave here.
You cannot bring signs into the rally.
Walk with me. Well, I'm comfortable here, actually. Whoa. Hey. Who do you think you are? Excuse me.
There is no video and audio allowed in this office.
No, I have work today.
You ain't gonna make it.
Wait a minute. Hey! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Why are you running from me? Because you scared me. What am I being detained for?
You're being served.
What is this?
You're being served.
What is this? Bureaucrats have a funny way of telling people no.
That's the sound of the men working on the chain.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan plan, a major setback in his bid to forgive billions of dollars in debt for tens of millions of borrowers. In a 6-3 ruling on Friday, justices rejected his program just minutes after another landmark judgment relating to free speech and LGBTQ rights. FSN's Benji Heyer reports from Washington.
It's a huge loss for the Biden administration. The judgment from the court that the government does not have the ability to wipe out more than a quarter of the country's $1.7 trillion in outstanding federal student debt. The challenge had been brought by 6 states, alleging the campaign pledge amounted to executive overreach, an improper exercise of power. On a busy morning for the justices, also by 6-3, they voted that an anti-discrimination Colorado law cannot require an evangelical Christian web designer to provide same-sex wedding websites. Businesses, says dissenting Judge Sonia Sotomayor, now have a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. A giant step backwards, claims Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, for human rights and equal protection in the United States. Benji Heyer, Washington, D.C.
The U.S. has sent B-52 bombers to the Korean Peninsula in the latest show of strength against North Korea. South Korea says joint military drills with the U.S. are in response to Pyongyang's continued missile tests. FSN's U.S. correspondent William Denzelo reports.
According to Seoul's defense ministry, the US nuclear-capable bombers participated in aerial drills with South Korean jets. This comes after the US deployed a nuclear-powered submarine to the Korean peninsula earlier this month, as Washington continues to increase the visibility of its strategic assets. The US and its allies have repeatedly called on North Korea to abandon its nuclear and missile programs. Pyongyang accuses Washington of planning an invasion and has conducted over 100 tests since the start of last year. Last weekend, mass rallies were held in the capital to mark the 73rd anniversary of the Korean War. William Denzelo, New York.
An air quality alert has been issued for all 5 boroughs in New York City as the smog from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket the Big Apple. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Friday's air quality readings topped 150, and with readings at that level, officials recommend that people with heart or lung diseases and children reduce their exposure to the smog, meaning stay indoors. It is expected that the smog moves out of the city by late Friday. Jody Jacobs, New York.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. The British government has been forced back to the drawing board over its controversial proposals to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Court of Appeal in London ruled that it would be unlawful for the government to process asylum claims in the African nation, arguing it is not a safe country for migrants seeking leave to relocate to Britain, despite assurances provided by the Rwandan government. Jacqueline McKenzie is with the UK law firm Lee Day and specialises in migration and human rights cases.
The assurances regarding the arrangements for people to be, to go to Rwanda just weren't good enough, effectively. I mean, that's what it boils down to. I suppose, given that the government has said they're going to appeal, what we'll probably see is this government either looking for another country, because I don't think Rwanda is going to be able to address all the safeguarding issues that are actually raised in the details. We've got the headlines, but if you look at the detail, there are a number of safeguarding issues, or hopefully it may just scrap the plan altogether.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak indicated he is not ready to do that and plans to try and overturn Thursday's ruling, with number 10 Downing Street hoping the country's Supreme Court paves the way for deportation flights to Rwanda to begin ahead of the country's next general election. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. The U.S. Supreme Court strikes down President Biden's student loan plan, a major setback in his bid to forgive billions of dollars in debt. The U.S. sends B-52 bombers to the Korean peninsula in Washington's latest show of strength against North Korea. And New York City issues an air quality alert as the smog from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket the Big Apple. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
A job applicant totally nails an interview with the person who will make his life a living hell for the next 5 years. And adjusting several sliders on a recording studio's mixing console pays off big time. This is the Onion Week in Review. This week, a study published by researchers at Johns Hopkins University revealed a direct correlation between breastfeeding and knowing exactly what's best for other people at all times. Overwhelming evidence indicated that the moment mothers begin breastfeeding, they develop a highly honed sense of what is wrong with others' approach to life, and were able to loudly enumerate those faults with total confidence in their accuracy. Researchers noted that the practice greatly boosted a young mother's immunity to the viewpoints of others. And in this week's Tech Report, a startup is very casual about its dress code and benefits. In other news, the Secretary of Interior says knocking down the Rocky Mountains could really open up the nation. And a woman is not going to let her husband of 60 years drag her into death at the same time.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. You can bring up whatever you want to discuss. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Chris.
All right, we're going to get back into your calls and thoughts. We were talking about the Supreme Court decisions, the latest iterations here that are making headlines, including the Supreme Court rejecting the Biden pay down, if you will, not pay off in most cases, but the college loan program that he was talking about, giving out $10,000 or $20,000 to people with college loans. That's been shot down by the Supreme Court. Also, the Supreme Court now ruling that businesses are free to discriminate against LGBTQ people if it violates their religious beliefs, according to a story over at Axios that we were sharing with you earlier, and we can dig into that a little bit further if you want. You're also welcome to weigh in on whatever's on your mind here. The number is 603-283-6160. Let's go to the phones here. Sarah is in New Mexico. You're on Free Talk Live. Sarah.
Yes, I'm speakerphone. Yes, I've been hearing about some environmental talks, and I heard these before, but these are edible seaweed water pods, and it will
seaweed water pods.
Yeah, I heard about these before. They were designing these water bottles that biodegrade. But I did not know that it was actually seaweed material.
Hold on, you're saying these are bottles of water that the plastic or whatever the material is on the outside is not plastic. It's in point of fact seaweed.
Right. So
okay.
so that I heard that they were developing these. Like I heard about it a couple of years ago, but I didn't know what they were trying to do. So, but my question is, how is it that when you have the water in there, it's not going to decompose? It's when you drink the water, supposedly it'll decompose within 45 days. So I mean, what?
That is an excellent question. Yeah, how does the water stay on a shelf? Because normally bottled water is going to sit somewhere. It's going to sit in a factory or a warehouse or whatever. It's going to move across. I don't know how long the average bottle of water, the package of bottles of water that's sitting on a store shelf will sit there in some cases. I mean, presumably if it's, maybe it goes faster than I think it does. I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that question either, but all I'm thinking of is if it's 45 days, you're going to have a very wet a lot of people are going to have a very wet cars if they make the
they leave the bottles in there, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I think the 45 days is after the water is consumed. And then it'll take 45 days and then it'll start to decompose.
So it has to be dry to decompose.
Maybe.
Interesting.
Maybe that's why. That is interesting.
Yeah, that's the science behind it. I'm very, very curious about this. I want to hear more about it because I'm like into like the environment. I think that's the common trend now. Aren't almost everybody into clean air, clean water, clean energy, conserving the environment? I'm sure you guys are like that too, right? I like
a nice environment. I like to have clean air and clean water. I mean, who doesn't like that? And if it's something that can actually be done that is profitable, and this may be it sounds like a really interesting product because a lot of people do understand that plastic, whether you feel like it's going to destroy the environment or not, it definitely is something that some people are concerned with, the plastics seeping into their food or the plastics seeping into their water supply. So there's various different concerns about these products. And if you can actually have something that just disappears over a short period of time, I mean, that seems like it's a pretty smart idea. Can it be done cheaply? Can it be done to the point where the seaweed bottles are similarly priced to the plastic bottles? If not, if it's an elite kind of item, it's never going to catch on.
You know what actually sounds kind of, the reason it sounds kind of interesting is convenience. Like, thinking about this a little bit, like I have a trash can under my sink, for recyclables, and I'm always putting the plastic, water bottle. I'm like most people. I have a stack of, I know you. I don't think you do. Ian,
I don't recycle.
No, but
I
don't.
do.
You also don't have like water bottles. You'll go to the sink and get your own water, right?
We got water bottles in the car. I drink
Or not
on
water
the road
bottles, but
frequently.
like pre-bottled water, right?
On the road. Yeah, we got them in the car.
Oh, you do, but I mean, you just don't. You don't have.
I don't have
them
around
in
the
your
house.
right? So I do.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of particularly bad in that respect, I guess you could sort of say. But I could see it being really super convenient if I could just take that bottle and instead of putting it in the recyclables, I just put it right into the disposal.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see it being a super convenient like reason to do that.
Yeah, like I said, depends on the cost. Sarah, I did find the story here. This is it's a few years old now, at least when it was first hitting the news. Maybe it's gotten even better, but the product, at least in 2019, was called Ooho or Oohoo or something. OOHO is how it is spelled.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's got the H2O somewhere into it. Yeah, right.
So it says here that concerned about the impact of the packaging industry was having on pollution in the environment. The two partners created Ooho, dubbed the edible water bottle. The company has since captured the imagination of the running crowd, and in April of 2019, it was announced that the startup would work alongside some other company to provide drink bottles at the 2019 London Marathon. The company's head of marketing said, at this year's London Marathon, all of our sport bottles made from 100% recycled plastic and will retain responsibility for them, collecting them on the course and returning them to our factory to be recycled back in new bottles. We're also investing in an innovative solutions, edible Ooho packaging.
That seems like such a potentially problematic, like not environmental, but like make you sick, right? Like, I mean, if you've got something on the shelf, it's supposed to, the plastic usually protects what's in the bottle, right? From like, germs and like viruses and things to then eat the bottle that is supposed to protect it.
Well, I don't know if you
edible.
have to eat it. I think the idea is you toss it out.
It just seems like it would be a bad
away.
idea to eat something, even if it is edible otherwise.
It's a flexible
the
plastic.
Thing is that,
Go ahead.
The seaweed is incredibly nutritious. You know, it's like a sea vegetable that's nutritious, but the only thing that you say that's like the bacterial growth, maybe because it's food. I'm concerned about it.
Yeah, sanitary.
But as far as the,
even if it protects what's inside, and I would drink from it, I wouldn't necessarily want to eat it.
It says here that Ooho is a flexible plastic packaging material made 100% from seaweed and plants. How can it be plastic if it's made from seaweed? Because plastic is
that confuses me.
Comes from petroleum production, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It's designed specifically for consumable liquids like water, juices, and sauce sachets. A liquid product is sealed inside a gelatinous membrane made from seaweed, developed by applying sodium alginate found in brown algae and calcium chloride together to create a concrete. The product is designed to be eaten either during or after its use. However, if it isn't eaten, the company claims the material will take an average of 6 weeks to degrade, which is about the 45 days that you were talking about earlier. And they've got a machine they're working on that would produce the product quickly in large quantities and with different and bigger shapes. So who knows? Maybe this thing has gotten some money and investment, and perhaps it's taken off since 2019. I'll tell you, at the time this article was written, they're just these little bags. They weren't in bottle form. They're like these little packets that have liquid in them. Yeah. Hey, thank you, Sarah, for bringing that up. It is an interesting concept, and definitely appreciate you reaching out about it. When you look for this seaweed, I just searched for seaweed bottles. There's a company coming up called Notpla, Notpla, and this is apparently the material. So it says this is the Ooho people. Ooho and our other packaging solutions are made from Notpla, a material made from seaweed and plants that disappears naturally. It's interesting. And this is, again, the question is, how much does it cost? What is it going to cost to put drinks into these bottles? Because you can go to the water aisle at your local grocery store, and you can get the cheap water which is usually what I buy, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm at Walmart, I'll just grab the Sam's Club or whatever the Walmart brand water is, load that up, and I'm done, right? But if you want, they got the fancy glass bottles imported from Italy. They got the mineral water, they got flavored water, they got all kinds of expensive stuff. So there clearly is a market for the expensive stuff. What section of the market, what percentage of the market it is, I don't know. And the question is, can the edible bottles here, the plant-based bottles, can they be marketed at a low cost to where it's actually competitive with the Sam's Club, or at the very least the Dasani or one of the name brand waters? Because then if you can get it in that price range, you could probably get a lot more popularity. If it's going to be 3 times the cost, you're likely not gonna.
This is interesting. I suspect it potentially has a place on the shelf, but it probably is more niche.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for it is simply because plastic bottles, plastic in general, is really, 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 really cheap, right? There's a reason that plastic is used so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the
cheap.
costs are so low. And
something new like this is probably not going to have, it doesn't have decades of development and cost reductions and efficiencies
and
or
volume. Volume is another one that's huge, right? With the plastic, you can get, they come in like pellets, and then you can very cheaply, manufacture it, manufacture whatever it is you want out of the plastic. But something like this, it might have to travel farther. You probably are going to have a limited number of like machines that can use it, like that kind of thing.
So, okay, I'm just looking at their website here and the frequently asked questions. So this is a site that's, this isn't for a consumer. This is for an industry.
Manufacturers.
Yeah, somebody that's looking into this as potential packaging. And the fourth question here, is it possible to brand NotPla products? And the answer is very short. Branding is an option on our boxes. So apparently they have something to replace a box of some sort, like a food container or something. But we can't print on our sachets at the moment. So the fluid containing packaging is just clear packaging at this point. So you cannot have the brand name on the packaging. It's not in a bottle form at all. It's still in this little, just imagine like a little bag of water, essentially, that you can hold in the palm of your hand. That's what we're talking about here. So it's not going to be something that you're going to see in your local convenience store anytime soon, it sounds like.
What's interesting is they sell milk in bags, I think, if I recall correctly, in a lot of countries. So it might not be... yeah, I know.
Okay.
But they also don't refrigerate the milk. So, it doesn't need to be refrigerated unless it's pasteurized, I think, or something along those lines.
No,
so
that can't be true.
I believe that is the explanation, but I am not an expert on this, and my information is like probably 2000, somewhere like 20 years old. But yeah, yeah. So.
If you want to comment, you can here. The
not that it's probably changed, but
603-283-6160. Skeeter is on the line in California. Go ahead, Skeeter.
Hey, how's my audio?
You're okay, but there's, I don't know, your phone has some sort of, I don't know how to describe it, like a weird, garbled kind of talk back. So like whenever we talk, I have to kind of turn you down because it's just constantly making noise. But when you talk, it's fine. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, because I wasn't able to interact with you guys on my last question yesterday, and you guys totally missed the point of my question. But anyways, I heard you guys talking about freedom, and I had another question on that. But for that, I heard you guys talking about recycling in that last segment, and I just wanted to let you know, recycling non-metallic items is harmful to the environment. You know that, right?
I don't recycle.
Yeah, I mean the other guy, he's talking about having some trash can for his plastics under his sink, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's another garbage can, effectively, but yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting episode of Penn and Teller's BS years ago, which used to be a really great show. Still is a great show. It's just not on the air anymore. That really opened my eyes on the whole recycling thing. Essentially, it's a scam that the federal government created a make-work program for in the 1980s, that it doesn't make any sense for most things, with the exception of, as you pointed out, Skeeter, aluminum, for instance, is actually worth recycling. It's worth paying for. It's worth doing. And I think there was one other thing, but it's not coming to mind what the other item was that might have still been worth doing. But definitely the aluminum was, and the rest of it was like, apparently it takes more energy to clean like the paper or the plastic or whatever to go through the process of actually recycling it. So it actually costs more energy, which is supposedly what you're looking to conserve, I guess, for a lot of these people that believe in this stuff. Anyway, go ahead, Skeeter.
Yeah, and it also winds up in the ocean. It goes to poor Southeast Asian countries where it winds up in the ocean, which is what you're trying to prevent in the first place. But I didn't want to get into that. I mean, you guys can research that. But I heard you guys talking about, like, freedom, who can businesses serve and stuff. And I was, in the absence of government intervention, blah, blah. But I don't understand how you guys immediately exclude the very likely possibility of things like forceful redistribution, market redistribution, or other acts of rational market aggression.
What are you talking about?
You guys totally dismiss the fact that the market will aggress.
Can you explain that?
Let's say there's rationale behind things like eminent domain, right? I mean,
there's always rationale behind why you would steal from someone, but that's not the market. That's the government coming in and stealing people's property. So what do you mean when you say the market will aggress? Can you give an example?
People are going to steal because it benefits themselves, right?
I mean, it's the government that's doing the stealing in that case. But can you tell me where you say the market is aggressing?
Yeah, just because the government usually is the one in current day that does acts of eminent domain, you totally dismiss the fact of the possibility that the market will actually also do eminent domain.
How's that? Can you explain how that would happen?
It wouldn't be eminent domain if the market did it.
And the market will gather enough money to forcibly redistribute property where it's best allocated.
But how does that work exactly?
That wouldn't be eminent domain.
Oh, hold on. When you say the market would gather enough money to forcibly redistribute property, how are they going to use force exactly?
It's not force because you're paying off the people who own the land.
That's what I would think. But I want to hear what Skeeter has to say. Go ahead, Skeeter.
Just like anything else in the market, supply and demand. So if there's enough demand for, let's say there's, have you ever seen that picture in China where those freeways go around this little house?
Yeah.
Where she refers to sell to the government?
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's enough, if that is causing that much inefficiency, over time each car has to go around it, which is an extra distance, that all adds up over let's say 50 years. I mean, there's going to be enough demand to forcefully redistribute, and it'll be like a fundraiser, a free market fundraiser, to forcefully remove this person.
But that's not force. The person in in the case you give the example of, and there's a lot of these examples where someone is refusing to sell.
Yeah, there's a name for that even.
And they don't have the eminent domain ability apparently to just come in there and take it from them, which is of course what the American government would do. They would just come in and steal people's property and give it to their corporate buddies, which is what we saw with the Kelo decision in New London back in 2005, by the way. So we know that's what happens here. But in the case that you're giving the example of, the individual is a holdout, and if they manage to raise a bunch of money to buy that person out, that is by definition not force. That is the choice of the individual to sell.
No. Again, you're putting words in my mouth without that. Well, so there's a case where they're irrational and they won't take any. I'm sure she wouldn't have took any amount of money.
Okay.
So in those cases, when she doesn't accept the money, there's money raised, and of course they're going to tender an offer before they resort to aggression, which is very expensive. But there is a point. There are irrational people out there who will take no amount of money.
So you're saying you believe that in a free market, which we don't have, but that libertarians tend to advocate in a free market. Libertarians also tend to advocate property rights. And so the idea would be that people would understand that you have the right to decide these matters without having somebody put a gun to your head. You're saying you believe that people in the marketplace would still go and threaten violence against an individual to get them to sell their property.
I got hung up when you used the word free. What do you mean by free market? I know I can say
that's a market in which there's no government violence, that there's no government threats, there's no regulatory mandates by some monopoly on violence. That would be a free market to me.
Yeah, there's no system in where you separate supply and demand. Like that's what government does. That's why it's inefficient, is because it spends money and it's not proportional to demand.
Government's inefficient because it is a monopoly, and it has no incentive to be efficient because it has no effective competition in any geographic area where where those people exist. So we're talking about getting rid of that, getting rid of the force of the state, and then having voluntary solutions be put into place. I don't want to live in a place where some road builder can just come in and use violence against people to get them to sell their property or force them off their land, because then you've essentially got another government.
Yeah, so first of all, the monopoly part of it is only part of why government's inefficient. Again, like you can have a monopoly that's efficient. I mean, it's hard, but if they accordingly allocate supply and demand, it'll be efficient.
It's a theoretical monopoly. I mean, I guess in theory, there could be a company that is just so darn good at what they do, and they're offering the cheapest, best potential product around that no one is competing with them. There is sort of this, whatever you might call a natural monopoly or whatever, not because they're being prohibited from having competition, but just because they're just that good and their product's just that cheap. We've never seen this before, of course. It doesn't actually exist. It is essentially a unicorn, this concept, but I guess it could exist. But yeah,
I feel like the best example of that would probably be something like maybe water or power, or not power, water or like gas lines or something, because it's unlikely, because of the cost of building out that infrastructure is so expensive, and the demand may not be sufficient in order to justify another competitor entering that market.
Could be, but even in the case of that, the water provider, if they raise their prices too much, it would become more economical to just have a man with a truck come by and deliver you 5-gallon or drill a well or whatever. So there still would be other options.
You're right.
In that case, Skeeter, thanks for the call tonight. Appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. I would not consider it would not be a free market. I don't know what Skeeter is talking about, but it's not a free market if somebody can just come along and put a gun to your head and tell you have to sell your property to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically saying that it would be like paying people to commit violent acts on your behalf if you wanted to acquire land that the seller wasn't willing to, or the potential seller wasn't willing to sell you the land.
In a free market that I think most of us envision, if somebody comes with a gun to force you to do something, then you have a right to shoot them to death.
Yeah, to defend yourself.
And most of us would support you in that. There's more coming up here. It's Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Joe Biden's student loan plan, a major setback in his bid to forgive billions of dollars in debt for tens of millions of borrowers. In a 6-3 ruling on Friday, justices rejected his program just minutes after another landmark judgment relating to free speech and LGBTQ rights. FSN's Benji Heyer reports from Washington.
It's a huge loss for the Biden administration. The judgment from the court that the government does not have the ability to wipe out more than a quarter of the country's $1.7 trillion in outstanding federal student debt. The challenge had been brought by 6 states, alleging the campaign pledge amounted to executive overreach, an improper exercise of power. On a busy morning for the justices, also by 6-3, they voted that an anti-discrimination Colorado law cannot require an evangelical Christian web designer to provide same-sex wedding websites. Businesses, says dissenting Judge Sonia Sotomayor, now have a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. A giant step backwards, claims Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, for human rights and equal protection in the United States. Benji Hire, Washington, D.C.
The U.S. has sent B-52 bombers to the Korean Peninsula in the latest show of strength against North Korea. South Korea says joint military drills with the U.S. are in response to Pyongyang's continued missile tests. FSN's U.S. correspondent William Denzelo reports.
According to Seoul's defense ministry, the US nuclear-capable bombers participated in aerial drills with South Korean jets. This comes after the US deployed a nuclear-powered submarine to the Korean peninsula earlier this month, as Washington continues to increase the visibility of its strategic assets. The US and its allies have repeatedly called on North Korea to abandon its nuclear and missile programs. Pyongyang accuses Washington of planning an invasion and has conducted over 100 tests since the start of last year. Last weekend, mass rallies were held in the capital to mark the 73rd anniversary of the Korean War. William Denzelo, New York.
An air quality alert has been issued for all 5 boroughs in New York City as the smog from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket the Big Apple. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more.
Friday's air quality readings topped 150, and with readings at that level, officials recommend that people with heart or lung diseases and children reduce their exposure to the smog, meaning stay indoors. It is expected that the smog moves out of the city by late Friday. Jody Jacobs, New York.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join us here. You can bring up anything you want to discuss. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join us online anytime you want at freetalklive.com. We have many features there. We have our own chat server. You want to join the trolls in the chat server? Hop on in there. Go to chat.freetalklive.com. If you go to the public rooms like the On Air Now, there tend to be a lot of trolls in there. But the nice thing about our chat server, as compared to, say, a centralized system like Discord, is the Free Talk Live server, you can actually make your own channels. So if you want to, you can create a completely private channel and only invite your friends. And keep out the trolls if you want. So it's up to you. You can do private channels, public channels, encrypted channels, non-encrypted channels. You decide how to make it. You decide how to administrate it. You can administrate it with an iron fist, or you can administrate it with hands off, or something completely in between. Just go to chat.freetalklive.com. and you can get started there. You have to follow the instructions to get connected. It takes a few steps, but once you're in, you're pretty much good to go. It's Ian and Chris here in the studio tonight. We were talking about discrimination, the Supreme Court ruling that apparently now it is legal in the United States to discriminate against LGBTQ people if it's for religious reasons at your business.
Now I really have to wonder if I'm allowed to discriminate against LGBTQ people
as a gay man.
As a gay man for non-religious reasons.
For non-religious reasons?
For non-religious reasons.
That would be an interesting question. Yeah, I again, having not read the actual ruling, I can't speak directly to it, but that's what the media is saying, right?
Yeah.
And so who knows what the actual truth is?
Yeah. We haven't dug into this anywhere near far enough to know. We're just kind of guessing and speculating based on the headlines.
But one of the dissenting, in the dissenting opinion, it was again a 6-3 ruling by the Supreme Court. The dissenting opinion does say that the way this ruling is interpreted, it may allow for people to discriminate against people for other, discriminate against other peoples, right? So not just LGBTQ, but people for their religion or their race, maybe? Or where they were born or whatever.
It does bring up an interesting question because I believe at least sex and race are protected in the Constitution, and I think that applies to businesses. If I'm
the
not
Constitution,
wasn't there
Civil Rights Act was not the Constitution. That wasn't a constitution. That wasn't a constitutional amendment.
Oh, what am I thinking of then? Was it just a law that was passed?
The Civil Rights Act was passed, I think, in 1969, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, something like that.
But that's the anti-discrimination.
Right.
stuff.
Okay. So it wasn't a constitutional amendment, but anyway. No, you know what I'm thinking of? That's what I'm thinking of, but what I'm thinking of is the constitutional amendment had to do with the slaves, I think, the end of slavery or something like that.
There was a 14th Amendment that purportedly did that. But
yeah, anyway, I'm mixing the things up. But it doesn't really matter.
Debate about that.
But it does go back to bring up an interesting question as far as, that is concerned. Am I allowed to discriminate against a black person?
Yeah, and that is the question here, and that's what the dissenting opinions were saying here. And again, this just comes back to that old libertarian viewpoint of I may not support, and I don't support racism, I don't support bigotry, I'm against those things, but I do support a person's right to be those things. If that is what a person wants to do, if they want to be ignorant, if they want to be rude, if they want to do those things, I don't have to do business with them.
Let's just clarify this a little bit further. You would not be okay with a white supremacist using violence against a black person, but
no, of course not.
But even though you don't support a white supremacist being racist against a black person, you would not prohibit it in law. You would not use violence against them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I would rather use the market against them. Use market mechanisms
against the white supremacist.
Correct. Meaning I'm not going to do business with them.
Yep.
If I know here in Keene, New Hampshire, it's a pretty small place.
Oh yeah.
There's only so many restaurants in town. If I find out a restaurant in town is not serving black people in Keene, New Hampshire, I'm going to be sure to not only never go to that business again, but also to inform all of my friends about it.
Yeah, I mean, could you even imagine if you and your friend, say you have a group of people and are mostly white, and you have a black friend that comes along with you to a restaurant, and they refuse service to your friend, your black friend?
I'm going to turn around and walk out.
Do you really think that restaurant is going to be in business long?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, the restaurant industry is a pretty competitive market too, even in a small town.
Yeah, you can't afford to turn anybody away.
Yeah, right? I mean, even if and it's interesting because you might be able to afford if it was the case that everybody was racist in Keene basically, and there was a small black population, maybe you could afford to turn away black people. But
That's
you can't turn away black people when the population isn't mostly racist.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And and that goes back to something you were talking about earlier, where people should be free to move about and move places where they're more welcome, where they feel better about that.
Yeah, my biggest concern is the restriction on movement that governments put in place, and they do it for different reasons, often tying children to parents or guardians, but also, and I think of that particularly with LGBT young people who are basically being persecuted in schools and things like that, where they're and by parents and things, and they're not allowed to leave. It's like there's something wrong with that, I think. But the problem is that the government it's a government problem. But it also, that kind of thing also happens elsewhere through other means, I think, and in terms of like suspending driver's licenses for people who, I'm trying to think of an example of this.
It's usually poor people.
Yeah. Child support would be a good example, right?
So they can't go to work.
So they can't go to work, or they can't leave. They, and it doesn't apply. It's not just there, but like New York City, at least at one point, they, and probably still are, if you had been caught graffitiing underage, you wouldn't be able to get a driver's license for some lengthy amount of time after you normally would have been able to get a driver's license. That's another
at least
example.
in New York City, you don't really need to drive anywhere in New York City because you can just take public transportation.
Yeah, I don't know.
Driving's much more important in more rural areas.
You're right. Sure. You're right. But it's still the restriction on your freedom of movement, I think, is a far bigger concern than some baker refusing to serve
no doubt.
serve me as a gay man.
And if a bunch of Christians want to move to the same town together, and everybody agrees they don't want to serve gay people or whatever it is that they're against, I'm okay with that too. Because then
everybody that supports gay rights and gay people or whatever, they're not going to come visit that town. They're not going to go there for their vacation, and I think that's fine too.
Yeah, I certainly think that I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to encourage people to do that. But I
actually do want to encourage it, because I'd rather have
those
it's a good
idea
live
encourage
together.
It? Because you might be right on this.
And like the same reason
but you're not encouraging them to be bigoted or whatnot.
I'm just accepting that they'll be bigoted.
Yeah, you're just saying that they are being bigoted, so let them go
off. I know.
Off
I'm not going to convince. I'm likely not going to convince them.
Right,
okay?
and I would agree with you. I don't think you're going to change anybody's mind.
And this is happening right now with the Porcupine Freedom Festival, the Free State Project summertime event. It's 1 week. Not even a whole week since PorcFest has ended, and already people are talking about naked people again.
Oh, no, the world's going to end.
Oh, God. Oh, we can't have our kids seeing somebody who's naked at the Naked Body Freedom Village in PorcFest. Or, oh, my Lord, somebody was topless at the Free Talk. Somebody was complaining online today because someone was topless at the Free Talk Live site. There was a day that Arya and Nikki and another lady recorded a topless episode of Free Talk Live. They were complaining because they saw it, their kids saw it, or something like that. And it's like, y'all just go have your own festival, okay? If that's what you want to do, if you guys are, you can have Intolerant Fest or whatever the hell you would call it, Christ Fest, or I don't know what it would be, but you'd have your own festival, and you could make sure that everybody agreed no one's going to take their top off. No one, no Christian family is going to be offended by somebody being free with their body. So that's the solution, is quit trying to have, other people live how you want, and just go live how you want over there, okay? Or at a different festival at a different time at the same park, if you want.
It's kind of crazy too, like that people are complaining, just because it's like it's in some sense it's kind of funny, just because libertarians kind of have done this in New Hampshire, in the sense that we've become a disproportionate voice in the state, just because we speak out and we do activism and we do all this stuff that locals just aren't going to do, because they don't have the motivation, for whatever reason. But these conservatives have come in. They're a very small number, but then
they're loud though.
They're loud and they complain, and it's like, you don't have to be here. You don't have to come.
Yeah, no, they don't. But they get all upset because PorcFest advertises itself as being family friendly. And
it is to a libertarian, but that doesn't mean it's conservative.
Right. And that's just it. Not all families are the same. Not all families have the same values. And when a conservative-minded person sees the words family friendly, they immediately presume that means they won't see some naked person at that location. And there's other people who say to themselves, well, family friendly means that there's cool people around and we're all respectful of one another and we're okay with other people expressing their freedoms how they want.
I think it's been traditionally, or I don't know if traditionally is quite the right word, but it's been understood as code for like not being, it's you would think it would mean something to the effect of, oh, there's activities for kids, right? Like,
that's true.
That's what I would sort of think. Yeah. But in reality, it's been code for conservative values.
I think you're right. Because the other things that happen at PorcFest are like people are getting high and then people are drinking alcohol. Like there's all kinds of things that are traditionally not family activities going on that campground. But the thing they're the loudest about is if there's some topless lady walking down one of the aisles to go get some breakfast.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And it's interesting because some of these people have even expressed they've either made threats or expressed some sort of violent.
Some have,
violent, and it's not. It's again, this is a very
most of them are just saying they're not going to go. Most of them, and that's fine. That's what I'm saying. Just don't go. It's fine. Yeah. The event would be fine without you. In fact, the event would be better. The event would be better without those people, because honestly, there's too many people attending PorcFest at this point. The park can't handle it. It doesn't have the infrastructure. Apparently the water got shut down multiple days this year.
3 days, I believe, yeah.
Too many humans at this park. It would be totally fine if the ultra-conservative Christian types went ahead and just forked off and did their own festival 2 weeks later or 2 weeks earlier or whatever, and then just have themselves their own, bring 500 Christians to the park and then have all the Bible studies you want to have. With no one topless. Everybody can wear long sleeves. Wouldn't want to tantalize anyone with showing any skin.
You know what I want? I want to bring in, okay, just for the sake of humor, I want to bring in some Muslims with the whole face veil and complain about all the Christians walking around without full veils.
Well, the Muslims and the
veils?
Christians.
Are they called veils? I never remember.
It depends. It's the
hijab,
burqa.
The burqa.
The burqa is the full-on, full body.
Yeah,
you can only see the eyes.
That's what I want to do. I want to bring in a couple of Muslims to complain about.
I think you're going to find that if you bring the Muslims in, they're actually going to team up with the conservatives, and they'll both be angry about somebody being topless. Let's go to CW. He is in Arizona listening to K-Talks. Go ahead, CW. Hello, CW. Oops, I got you now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry about yesterday, Ian. I made you upset. I'm sorry.
I don't even remember what it was about, dude. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Anyways, you're talking about the Christians starting their own little festivals. But you understand that if they do that, then obviously people are going to infiltrate and say, they're being so kind and everything, and it's just going to.
What do you mean they'll
mess.
infiltrate?
Well, because the Christians go to the Pork Fest and say, hey, they're topless. You said family friendly, and I don't like seeing, showing my kids all this stuff, And then if you said, why don't the Christians just start their own little thing? Well, people are going to go there and start bashing them too. So
no, they won't.
Why would I go to a Christian festival?
I have no interest
or
in going.
Conservative festival.
There's always people that are going to bash the other.
Well, no. The thing is, when you go to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, you sign an agreement. When you buy the ticket, there's an agreement that goes along with it, and in the agreement it says you may see some naked people at some point while you're at Rogers Campground. There's a chance you may come across this. In the same way the Christians can say, you're not allowed to be naked, you're not allowed this and that, you're not allowed to have alcohol, you're not allowed to have, you fill in the blank. And if you violate that, they can throw your ass out of their festival, and they would be well within their rights to do it.
It's if you do even just a little bit of research into the festival, Pork Fest, right? It's pretty clear about what the event's about. It's about freedom. It's not about one specific freedom. It's about all the freedoms.
Yeah, there is zero chance that Body Freedom Village is going to try to infiltrate the Christian festival. They would not be welcome there.
There isn't even that much there's not even that many naked people running around the campground. Like, it's
10 of them or something. Maybe
yeah,
8.
I didn't witness firsthand, but I could probably count
witness
up
them, yes.
I know you did, and I saw some pictures.
I was at the Naked Olympics.
At the Naked Olympics, I didn't go to that. I didn't see that, but I think there was probably a dozen people.
Yeah, it was very silly and fun.
Right.
What else, CW?
Oh, well, anyways, you said something about the water. There wasn't enough water. Man, I would not want to go to somewhere where I couldn't bathe or drink. Man, could you imagine that? Just dehydrating and passing out from.
Well, I mean, there's still water you can get in bottled form as far as drinking.
The problem wasn't a thirst issue. The problem was the porta potties filled up, and then there was nowhere to go.
Oh my God!
Oh no! See, I'm a plumber. I deal with porta potties all the time, and those things are horrendous during the summer. Well, I don't know how hot it gets up there.
It probably wasn't that bad because in northern New Hampshire in the mountains, it doesn't get like super hot.
It can still get up in the 80s.
It's warm, but it's not like it would be probably in certain other.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be. Go ahead.
120 degree poops.
No, it's not going to be that.
It probably was in the 70s, low 70s or something like that.
Hey, thanks CW for the call tonight. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're not going to go to a Christian festival. Okay, no interest. And they're not going to. And if they set up their rules, they're the ones that rent the park. They're the ones that get to set the rules. So if they don't want people doing alcohol and people doing drugs and people being topless, then they will prohibit those things from happening, and they will be within their rights to kick those people out of the park. And those people wouldn't want to go to that festival anyways because it's too square. Why would you want to go to a square festival?
Yeah, you know what's also funny about this conversation is it's not even like it's all the Christians out there who have a problem with nudity or even drugs. Like we think of that as conservative values, and they are often like Christians, but it's not all Christians. Like there's a lot of Christians who don't have any problem with, like, they've got nudist Christian camps and things
really?
like that, and beaches and all sorts of things.
Christian nudists, huh?
Yeah, like it's not like we perceive it just because I think it's probably like, I don't know if it's Protestant but it's like a particular.
Man. The Christian nudists need to come to PorcFest because I think they would have a lot of fun there.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be crazy if there was an actual nudist Bible study that happened at the Porcupine Freedom Festival?
That would be great.
But only if it was real, right? Like I don't want the I don't want the Body Freedom Village guys if they're a bunch of atheists or whatever. And I don't know what their beliefs are, okay? They may have they probably have different religious beliefs. But if there actually were some real like Christian nudists there, I think it'd be awesome if they had a Bible study, and it would fit in completely with the Porcupine Freedom Festival, because there are Christians. I don't want to make it sound like this is anti-Christian rant. It's not, okay? There are Christians who go to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and they have a great time.
Yeah.
And they don't get all uppity about somebody being topless over there or somebody being naked over somewhere else or walking down the aisles. They don't care about that. Like I think a perfect example would be Russell Canning, who is just the easiest going guy you're ever going to come across. He's a Free State Project early mover. He lives here in the Keene area. And the guy's always got a smile on his face. There's nothing that can set this guy off. He's not mad about anything. He never pushes his Christianity on you. If you ask him, he'll tell you all about it, right? But if you're sitting down at dinner with Russell, he's just going to be talking about activism or secession or whatever's going on with the.
Just don't bring up the flat Earth.
Don't bring up flat Earth. Yeah, with
trust
Russell.
Me on this
yeah.
one. Don't bring up the flat Earth.
He might bring that one up, but
yeah, that's what I was just thinking. He might not bring up the Christianity, but the flat Earth stuff's another story.
Yeah. But for the most part, he's really fun to be around. He's fun to talk to because he doesn't try to run your life. And there are those Christians who are at this festival, and they're great. Those are the good Christians as far as I'm concerned. They're not complaining about what other people are doing. They're just doing their own thing. Because that's what you can do at PorcFest. You can just go there and do your own thing, and as long as you're okay with other people doing their own thing, it's all good.
And you know what? It's kind of interesting too, in that there's other religious. There's a Jewish contingent, just like there's a Russian contingent. Yeah. There's a Jewish contingent and a Christian contingent, but the Jewish contingent isn't complaining. It's just those couple of Christians that are complaining.
Yeah, that is a good point. Although Footloose, who's an occasional caller on the show, he's one of the people who is upset about this, people being naked or whatever. I think he's claimed he's not a Christian. So it is just like the conservatives. I think we can. Yeah. I think it's more fair to put it on the backs of the
I think
quote unquote
conservative is definitely a better way to phrase it than to say Christians,
right?
Or because I mean.
It jumps to a conclusion to say that they're Christians. I don't think they all are.
I mean, I think these people are probably Christians.
They may have been raised
that
Christian.
Are complaining, but I don't think it's the majority of Christians at PorcFest or anything like that. And I guess what I would be saying is I don't want to blame the Christians for being anti-nudist when that's not the case.
That's a good point.
It's a few conservatives who are anti-nudism, and it's. Yeah,
and it may have become. I mean, I bet if we looked into their history or how they were raised, we'd find out that they were raised by ultra Christian conservative parents or something like that. But that's just a presumption, because I mean, it seems to me to be a religious viewpoint that nudity is bad. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe there's a religious people who also believe that nudity is bad or nudity is wrong, and I don't know where that would come from. Besides sort of a puritanical religious mentality at some point in the past.
I've never heard of anybody saying, oh, I'm atheist and I'm against nudity.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't seem to mix, but, I don't know. I mean...
Could be. Yeah. There was somebody else online today who was involved with the Libertarian Party. I don't know what his religious beliefs are, but he was upset about the toplessness at the Free Talk Live tent, and upset about allegedly somebody from Body Freedom Village went naked as they were walking around the park, which supposedly is against the rules of PorcFest.
Okay, so I think there's probably so there's so few people walking around the campground naked like this.
Yeah,
it's probably Jeffrey. Is it Jeffrey? Is his name?
Jeff is the head of the Body Freedom Village.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's probably Jeffrey when he went around in his skirt without anything. Did
that happen this year too?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
And there were two little, probably 3 or 4 year old kids running around at the picture on Saturday that were naked.
Oh my God!
So those are probably, it's got to be one or the other. I'm pretty sure. So it's just kind of funny.
Yeah, it's just sometimes I'm amazed by people who are upset by this, like people who are otherwise really good libertarian activists. They just get all twisted up over this particular issue, and it's just like I cannot understand it. And when I try to ask about it, like, just help me understand why you have this viewpoint. Usually the response in this case was, well, you don't get to tell me how to raise my kids. I'm like, whoa, I'm not telling you how to raise your kids.
You're the one who brought them here.
I'm just saying I'm asking you, why? Why is it this way? Why are you so anti-nudity? Why do you think, I mean, first of all, it's unrealistic, number one, to think that you can raise your kids in the internet age and have them never see a naked person. I'm sorry. Look, I was raised in the 80s and the 90s, I remember.
I don't even think you can, even without the internet, I don't think you can keep your kids from seeing nudity.
I was raised in the 80s. We were passing along a Playboy magazine on the school bus when I was in probably first grade or something like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing in like fifth grade. I don't think I ever saw anybody pass one around on like a school bus, but certainly by like in like fifth and maybe like fifth grade, certainly
pre-internet. Pre-internet.
Yeah, like I remember there was a camp I went to and there were kids passing around a Playboy, right? Like,
whatever it is your kids are seeing that you don't know about is way worse than anything going on at PorcFest, okay?
And the other thing I think is kind of funny is like there's so many other encounters that young people are going to have with nudity, just like with, there's going to be kids running around naked and things like that. And they never have a problem with that. It doesn't seem like they have so much of a problem with that. But that's also like you would think they'd have a problem with. But they don't.
It just doesn't make any sense. And they're never going to explain it in any sort of rational manner. So they don't belong at PorcFest. So don't go. Out of time for tonight. You can join us tomorrow night. Online in the meantime, over at freetalklive.com. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an